Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to some race reaction from the 2022 Dutch Grand Prix. Don't know why I started like that. I just did. Hope you're all well in chat. What do you reckon to that one? I thought that was going to be a bit of a snooze fest early doors. It got a bit quiet, didn't it? And I thought, bit intriguing on strategy. Maybe it'll be one of those quiet races, and then we got safety car chaos and it all kicked off, which is just what seems to happen in Formula One sometimes. And we all love a late safety car, don't we? Unless you're Mercedes, of course. Not really going their way today. We'll get to that, of course, shortly. I will be joined by Dan as well in just a moment to talk about the race. We'll go through the teams in order as we always do, and probably mix it with the first two teams because I think their race is kind of intertwined quite nicely. Then we'll do all the usual stuff to go on top of that. Driver of the day. We'll do some Q&A as well. I'm sure plenty of you got some silly season chat. Interesting stuff as well on Pierre Gasly we'll get into later from Helmut Marko post-race, or specifically Colton Herta. But I'll save that for a little bit later. Like I say, I am going to jump straight into this one because Dan might have to disappear early and I want to get through everybody before he runs away and leaves me on my own with you crazy lot. I love you, really. Good evening, Dan, mate, or pre-evening, as I'm now going to keep calling it. What do you reckon to that race? I just said to chat there, it started off a little bit quiet, but really the strategy intrigue was there, but it was the safety car that kicked that one off, really.
I really enjoyed that one. And just like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. Going into this one, following last year and an F2, and just the nature of the circuit, I thought it was going to be a snooze fest as well. I thought it's so difficult to overtake. Traditionally, we always say Hungary's the Monaco without the barriers, but this morning I just had that gut feeling that it would be Zandvoort. And last year it was a little bit like that. And as I've just said, Formula 2 this morning wasn't the overtaking fest that we expect in Formula 2. But I thought this race was really, really fun. And that strategy intrigue, which I love, I know you love, and so many people listening love, that was definitely there today. There was more overtaking than last year. I think there were moments that were a little bit slower, and that's natural with any race. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I think we've got a lot to talk about. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, starting with your bold claim there were more overtakes than last year. I don't have the stats in front of me to back that one up, so I'm going to have to take your word on it. I'll tell you what, well, somebody in my comments actually the day said that there was, I think it was like 24 on-track overtakes last year on track after the first lap. So if there were fewer than that, it certainly felt like there were more than last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean there were more than last. I totally know what you're saying, Dan. Don't worry, I'm not gonna throw you under a bus too much. I'm just saying I don't have the stats to back it up. So 1 million overtakes. Let's go with that. We saw 1 million today. I think we just need to talk about Red Bull and Mercedes, don't we, to kick this off, because it was really between those two at the front, because we'll get to Ferrari in a minute. Where's their pace gone? Anyway, so we've got to start with Mercedes and Red Bull, specifically Red Bull. If you'd have said to me this morning, Max Verstappen wins the Dutch Grand Prix, I would assume he disappeared, got it won, done nice and early, no pressure. But that doesn't tell the full story, does it? It doesn't. You look at that and you think pole to win. It wasn't a pole to win race. And I feel like today, whilst Max absolutely deserves that win because he did everything right and Red Bull did everything right, I do feel like that could well have been Mercedes' best shot of a victory, and I feel like they've kind of thrown that away a little bit. But that we can't take anything away from Max today. Like I say, Red Bull nailed the strategy. They made the right call on tyres. He got the move done on Hamilton at the restart. Lovely run out that final corner, by the way. Kind of, I thought Hamilton might have waited a bit. Maybe Liam, not quite as much as Liam Lawson maybe this morning, but waited a little bit down that straight and then, you know, let it go rather than giving Max that massive toe, given the straight line speed we know they've got. But great drive from Max. Great race overall. But like I said, I just feel like Mercedes, this feels like one that got away for them. And possibly when I look at the calendar, actually, Dan, with what we've got coming up, arguably their best shot at a race win this season now.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Monza's quick, isn't it? They're going to struggle at Monza. Suzuka, they've got some long runs at Suzuka. I
feel
Mexico's
Singapore
quick. Maybe Singapore's a good shout. Yeah, actually, yeah. I always forget about Singapore. Sorry.
Well, I mean, we've not had it for what seems like 10,000 years, so don't worry. Yeah, I think this one will hurt, and I think Hamilton's team radio and Toto coming on the radio as well is all very telling. George, obviously, with his best ever result in Formula One, if you want to include Spa or not last year, so it's still a good result for them. But the fact that they are disappointed with a second and fourth, I think that in itself paints the picture that they are a little bit disappointed today. And the race win was definitely there. You're right. We definitely don't need to miss out on Verstappen today and gloss over that because it was another great drive. And I know Hungary and Spa, they were comeback drives and he really had to work for them. And if you looked at today's race on paper, if you'd have gone yesterday after qualifying, he's on pole, this morning woke up and thought, yeah, Max is going to get that win. If you didn't watch the race and just saw the result, you'd think, yeah, that was easy for him. But I don't really think that paints the full picture today. And Mercedes had lots of choices with strategy, but Red Bull were a little bit cornered, I feel, for the first time in quite some time. Though Ferrari weren't quite there on pure race pace this particular time out, Ferrari had their own little strategy going on, trying to stick with Verstappen and copy them. And for what seems like the first time this year, Mercedes were also in that strategy fight, but within the window to also cause Red Bull headaches. So Max had the choice of, does he cover off Charles? Does he cover off the Mercedes? And that was really the fun part of the race because we just have not seen that often enough this year. And though Ferrari weren't able to come back into the fold, that meant Mercedes really were in the fight for the victory. The real story, I suppose, is going to come in those two safety cars, the virtual safety car and then the actual safety car, because if that wasn't there, I think Mercedes would have been an awful lot closer. But that eventual restart, I suppose that's going to be that big talking point on whether they went right with the strategy, wrong with the strategy. It's a little bit of both, I think. And yeah, though today, I don't want to say should have been a victory, but definitely was a good chance of a victory. I still, in my gut, think the progress they've made since the early races, but also thinking back to Hungary and now today, I still think Singapore, Suzuka slightly, maybe Brazil, Mercedes is still going to have a solid car to be able to challenge. But I think you're right. This was a really, really good opportunity today. Second's not bad, but they're going to be disappointed.
Especially with Ferrari kind of out the running, because they weren't, again, we'll get to Ferrari in a minute, they weren't really there on pace, were they? So if Ferrari are on the pace at the tracks coming up, then it's going to be tougher for Mercedes. I know that's Michael Owen punditry. That is, if there are more cars at the front, it's harder to win. It's that kind of thing, or Will Buxton commentary, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I'm finding it really difficult to sum up Verstappen's race because he drove really well, did nothing wrong, great drive. Lewis Hamilton, I feel he could have made the same call as George Russell. I haven't seen any post-race analysis, so there may be some Sky stuff they've been through that shows that he couldn't, but my gut at the time was he could have made that call. But when you're the race leader, as we saw at a certain race last year, it's not always easy to risk giving up track position, and maybe they felt they could have hung on, but George made the right call. I feel like Lewis didn't, but I still think it was a very good drive from Hamilton. But what I'm struggling with Verstappen is it's a win, it's a very good drive, a great drive. I'm going to say it's annoyed people in chat because you're not allowed to give any driver any credit for anything they do on the internet. So there you go. But it was a great drive from Max. He won the race. He overtook Lewis Hamilton to do so, despite the fact at one stage in that race, Dan, it looked like it was done. I thought Mercedes had him. I did not think they were going to get this on Red Bull. I thought they were looking at P2 at best, probably P3. So I'm trying not to take anything away from it, but it's really hard to sum it up. And we've got to bring it up. And I know we're very early talking about AlphaTauri, but the Yuki Tsunoda situation, which we'll dig into later, I'm not claiming conspiracy, because if you think a team, when you consider that the FIA monitor all team radio, if you think as a team that could have been orchestrated that perfectly, with the greatest of respect, you are deluded. There is no way that is a big conspiracy theory. I'll tell you what it is. It's a massively questionable call, or several massively questionable calls by AlphaTauri that just happened to work in favour of Red Bull, and it just so happens yesterday that it worked in favour of Red Bull as well when Sergio Perez spun. But I don't believe these are deliberate acts, because if we go back through history, there are moments like this all the time. I mean, you want to talk deliberate, we're talking Crashgate in Singapore. It didn't get any more obvious than that. But Checo in qualifying, who I think is under big pressure at the moment, Perez. I think he's not performing. We will get onto that in a second, but he's not really performing at the moment. He's pushing hard. He makes a mistake in that penultimate corner. Do I think Checo's a good enough driver to make that mistake on purpose and not stick it in the wall at that corner? You know, you've got to be pretty sure you're not going to put it in the wall. And I just think it was miscommunication, confusion, and absolute cock up at AlphaTauri. It just so happens to have been a Red Bull second driver and their junior team that have and anybody, as surely even the most hardcore Max Verstappen fan has got to admit, looking at this, that he has got lucky this weekend thanks to a mistake from his teammate in qualifying and AlphaTauri just being incompetent today. Do you think it's a conspiracy, Dan? There's a couple of people in chat saying it is a conspiracy, but I think I think it's delusional to say that, to be honest with you. I think you're just digging for a story that isn't there. If that had been any other race and Hamilton, is it still, because, you know, if Aston Martin do that, they've got good ties to Mercedes, not quite to the same level as AlphaTauri. Is that a conspiracy if that happens the other way? No, it's not a conspiracy. AlphaTauri just made the right arse of themselves. Unless you disagree, Dan. If you think it was, don't feel you can't say it, mate. We're here for opinions, so go for it.
Yeah, we are. Unfortunately, I do agree with you. It has happened before
fishy
in Formula One.
We have to admit it looks fishy, but
I think the fact that the initial pause on track when he thought the tyre had come off and then kept going in itself is a very, very strange incident. You feel there would be sensors on that car. You feel Yuki, if he was that adamant that a tyre was going to come off or had come off, he stops the car, he gets out. It's very strange that he felt it was off, but decided to pull over and then kept going. That's bizarre. I don't think that's ever happened in Formula One, especially since I've been watching. Then the fact he came back to the pit lane and the whole seatbelt debacle, which I think Jenson Button or someone said in commentary was that he'd undone them and then they were getting them back on and going out again. And already, as soon as he was leaving the pit box, it seemed like he was extra slow. I know they've got to go slow in the pit lane, but even slower than the limit. And there was no real gusto to get going again. That was very apparent before he'd even pulled over for a second time. So all of that in itself is strange. And yes, it did, by default, help Max Verstappen. I still feel Verstappen was in a good place to win that race. I don't think it was in the bag of Mercedes until that virtual safety car came out. And it was only really a little bit later on with the full full safety car, where I think it fully went into Verstappen's favour, with Mercedes not quite going the right way on their strategy. But even with the Yuki thing, at this point of the championship, what would be the benefits for AlphaTauri and Red Bull staging something like that? Because Max is so far in front in the standings. And also, again, I want to make it clear, I don't think this is the case.
No.
I do not think this is a conspiracy, but Max is so far in front. Though I know you've made it clear, Sean, that on Twitter it's still quite close to the championship, so I don't want to throw it away just yet.
Very tight. Only 109 in it.
Very tight, exactly. That's close. But the gap is so big. If they really wanted to do it, they would have done it last year, because all they're going to risk this year is just getting disqualified from the championship, which there's no point in that because it's pretty much wrapped up. I know it's Formula One. I know anything can change, but doing something that brave like Renault did all those years ago just makes no sense whatsoever. I think it's just pure timing, luck, if you want to call it that, on Verstappen's half. But that being said, he was driving such a good race, was in control anyway. It's not as if he was a Fernando Alonso completely out of it and it was perfect safety car timing. It was just nice safety car timing for Max Verstappen. So, it's slightly fishy, and I think you're right. I think the bigger story there is with AlphaTauri and how they handled the situation. I think that's the issue. I think that's a separate issue, though, to the Red Bull one. I think it's just convenient timing for Verstappen and nothing more than that.
Just to answer Eugene in chat, says he didn't stop the first time because the team said the tyres were okay, and then the sensors that fell off, and then goes on to say, if I can find it, because I need to answer this one. So it makes sense to you to let Yuki go back out knowing he kept saying something was wrong with his car. First of all, and I'll always make this point, don't ever put words in my mouth. I did not say that, Eugene, at any point in that at all. We will talk about AlphaTauri properly when we get there. I am not saying it makes sense. I'm saying it's not a conspiracy. Whether or not it makes sense or not, all right, then fine. It doesn't make any sense. If your driver's saying the car is unsafe, why the hell are you sending him back out again? If your driver's saying the car has a wheel loose and he's not happy with it, why are you telling him to come back to the pits after he's undone his belts? We can talk about that in a separate conversation, but talking about it as a conspiracy is just typical Twitter, social media, I'm going to say it, DTS bollocks. It really, really is. It's the kind of thing that we'll watch DTS in March next year and it will all be around that and this big, massive conspiracy. And if you want stories like that, that's fine. Go watch EastEnders, all right? Because that is not what has happened. This is complete and total fluke for Red Bull. Yes, it's very fishy and convenient, all in quote marks, because it happens to be an AlphaTauri, but it's not, because as Dan's pointed out there, why? What are Red Bull gaining from it? Yes, Max wins his home race, which he did last year, but he's 109 points in front of the championship. Even if he finishes third behind both Mercedes today, he still extends his championship lead. There is no gain from doing that at all. If the championship is 1 point in it between him and Lewis Hamilton, maybe we can have the conversation, but there's absolutely no way. I'm sorry. I'm not ever going to entertain that. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I'll always read them out. I'll always give people a voice because that is what this channel's about. But I will call BS when words have been put in my mouth. So I don't know it's on purpose. You don't know it's on purpose. The only people that know for sure are AlphaTauri. But I do not believe they could time that perfectly with all the monitoring that goes on by the FIA. And I'll tell you something right now. If it comes out tomorrow in the FIA that they're investigating it, then I will take this back and I'll go live and I'll apologise to all of you. But based on the information we have now, absolutely no way. Oh, it's been a while since I've done that. That felt good. I'm also having a bad day. So thank you very much to Charles Edward Cheese, mate. Thank you very much for your super chat. Says, oh my effing G. Just finished the race. Look, Verstappen had luck bags, but that's part of it. Also smart call from Russell himself. So not mad there, but these goddamn back markers. Initial pause and let's them back out like, bruh, I wanted to see if Russell had Hamilton. I totally get it. I'm not going to read all of that because there's some swears in there. I know I keep swearing, but people keep telling me off for that. Questioning Mercedes strategy as well there, Charles, which I totally get. Yeah, I thank you very much, mate. You know, all I can say is thank you. We did later say in chat a shot for every 50 likes. So if we can get this to 500 likes, you are going to get Charles Edward Cheese absolutely smashed. So every 50 likes, Charles will take a shot and he'll let us know at the end how he's getting on. So thank you very much, mate. Please get this to 500 likes for Charles Edward Cheese. And if you hate me for my comments, then get it to 500 dislikes as well, and we'll have a 0% or 50% on the like to dislike ratio. Ruby as well, thank you so much. Says, I think that it is a conspiracy. Yuki is no longer a rookie. The team telling him to stop on track, not in the pits, is dodgy. Yuki interviews after 2. Thank you very much, Ruby. I appreciate that one. Sorry, it kind of went away from your man today. I think he had a great shot at winning. Like I said earlier, I don't agree that it's a conspiracy, but as I say, absolute. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, so yeah. That's that one. I've kind of lost where we are because I went on that rant, Dan.
Mercedes. We kind of glossed over Mercedes, I guess.
We've kind of done Mercedes and Red Bull together, haven't we? So,
well, more so, what do you feel about the strategy call with Hamilton on that restart?
I think Russell smashed it. Funnily enough, I know you said it on Hamilton, but I think Russell smashed it. I think he made the call, but as I kind of touched on earlier, it's an easier call for Russell to make from P2, P3 at the time. It's an easier call for, if he's leading that race, I do not believe he puts the softs on. If Hamilton is P2 or P3, I believe he puts the softs on. Because at that stage, if you're going for the win and Max has put the softs on, you may as well go for it if you're the car behind or whatever. Do you know what I mean? If you're leading the race, and we saw it in Abu Dhabi last year, it's a defense I'll always put on Lewis for that. It's all right us saying he's got to pit for the softs, but if you're leading a race, it's a lot harder to make that call. That's where the team need to be leading with a bit more data, but it was all very late, wasn't it? Because Russell made his stop. He didn't pit when the safety car came out. He pitted in the lap through the pits, didn't he, under the safety car? So it was all very quite late. So I think I saw Nico Rosberg saying something about how Mercedes should have pitted Hamilton, and with hindsight, yes, they should have, but I totally understand why they didn't, because Toto Wolff was saying afterwards that he felt that, if we, I can't remember exactly, his words were something along the lines of, if we pit, whatever we'd done, we were screwed, and they kind of wanted to try and go for the win, and they'd said pre-race that they were going bold on strategy to try and win it. So at least they stuck to their strategy, but sometimes you've got to adapt. It's a really difficult one because I totally understand why they've not pitted him. But I feel like it's too easy for me to sit here an hour and a half after the race saying they should have pitted him, because of course I can say that. It's easy, isn't it? But at the time, I don't know, maybe leave George out would have made a bit of sense. I think Paul de Resta touched on that, or Jensen Button said it in chat, to give Hamilton a buffer maybe. Keep George out in P2 to try and at least hold Verstappen off a little longer, and then maybe you'd have had Hamilton 2 and 3, but then Perez caught them and Leclerc caught them. I mean, Perez didn't get past, but he still started to catch them. But Leclerc got through, so they probably still would have ended up with one on the podium. It's difficult, isn't it? It was quite a tricky one to beat. Do you get what I mean about the lead thing?
Oh, no, definitely. And pretty much I can only echo what you've just said, and I think you're right. When Toto Wolff was explaining the strategy they went through, it was very clear they were going for the victory. They're not in this championship fight with Red Bull and Ferrari. I don't want to say it doesn't matter to them if they get a 4th place and they finish behind Leclerc, but they're comfortably in 3rd. And I know, as someone will always say in chat, and I'm very aware it's close, I know they're closing in on Ferrari, but when you consider where they started the year and their aspirations, just picking up a victory at this point would be incredible. I don't think they're going to slip down to 4th. I don't even think it's mathematically possible now for them to slip down to 4th. So they were very much gung-ho for that today, and their strategy from the start very much pointed towards that. And like you just said, and like Toto said, I think they could have boxed both cars. They could have settled for 2nd and 3rd and hoped they'd maybe keep up with Verstappen, or he'd make a mistake on the restart. But it's Verstappen. The chances of that happening are so unlikely for him to make the mistake. They would have been accepting not taking the victory. If they'd have kept both of them out, that runs the risk of 2 cars being on old tyres, cold tyres. And look how quickly Verstappen got past Lewis. It only would have needed maybe even the next lap or a couple of laps for him to get past George and Lewis. So that would have been a silly strategy. I think, if I'm honest, I think they went the right way. It's fair if Mercedes fans are a little bit annoyed and would have liked to have seen that challenge a little bit more with all of them on fresh softs. But I think by keeping Lewis out, it ran the chance or opportunity that Max still has a difficult start, but George on his softs manages to get past Max. And then Lewis has a bit of a buffer, or George is able to get in front of Lewis and win that way. I think what it really comes down to is the fact that Mercedes don't have as good a car as Red Bull. I think that's very apparent now. And I know we've already spoke about this evening that they've got a solid car on circuits like this that don't have top speed, they're a little bit more twisty and narrow. That suits that Mercedes car a lot better than your likes of your Spas and your Monzas. So they had a good chance today, but still on circuits that suit that Merc, it's not quite as good as the Red Bull that seems to be dominant everywhere. So it was going to be a gamble, whatever they went for. Like you, I think Russell was very smart on his decision, but I don't think Hamilton, in the position he was in, had that freedom to make the call if he wanted to go for the victory. I think that was not his best chance, but for the team overall, the most sensible route at the time. I would only say, and this is rare criticism, but I don't think he did the best on the restart, Lewis Hamilton, this time. And who am I to criticize a 7-time world champion who knows exactly what to do? But I think maybe he would have benefited going a little bit longer or trying to catch Verstappen out a little bit more. It just didn't quite seem like the traditional Lewis Hamilton safety car restart we're used to. But hey, he was on cold tyres, not as good straight line speed as that Red Bull. So he knows what he's doing a little bit better than me. But I just feel that wasn't his best restart. But overall, yeah, I think there's not much Mercedes could have done in that moment.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, I think I thought Lewis might have waited a little bit, gone a bit further down the straight, Liam Lawson-esque, not quite to that extent though, but he went for it, and he was always going to struggle to hold Max off whatever Max might have got in the next lap. But we're talking about Mercedes not making the right call on Hamilton and how Red Bull got it right with Verstappen, and we're talking about conspiracy theories. I'll reiterate the point now. I've had a drink and chilled out. If you believe that, that's fine. I do not agree with you, but, you know, whatever. Just looking at the chat, still having a pop, but there you go. But what I feel like we're kind of missing here, and all of this talk is masking, is the brilliant call from George Russell. Because although the team were involved in the call, because they could have said, no, you're not, we're not putting softs on you, he ultimately said, let's put the softs on, let's give it a go. So we could talk about them cocking up Hamilton's strategy, or not taking the risk on Hamilton's strategy, or Hamilton not making that call, or whatever. But ultimately, George Russell did, and he deserves a hell of a lot of credit for that, given that he is the more inexperienced driver, and a lot of people might not have expected him to do it. But then I think back to his time at Williams, specifically Hungary, last year, when he's saying, was it last year? Yeah, 2021, where he's saying, if you need to sacrifice me to help Nicky, then let's do it. He's always thinking of strategy, so maybe it's not a surprise to see it. So I think George deserves a lot of credit for that. And his drive today, I understand that Hamilton's annoyed that his teammates put on the softs, but that was his call, George. And ultimately the team have got to try something, because Verstappen's gone onto the softs as well. So they've probably thought, actually, yeah, George, let's give it a go. So I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that, George. I really, really believe that. And I think he had a good race again. I think he's impressed a lot of people this season, has George Russell. There've been a couple of moments on first laps, of course, Saraf, but he's impressed a lot of people. He's surprised me. I didn't think he was going to be doing this. I think he's moved up in the championship now, hasn't he? Or is he right on the fringes? Whereas he's on P4, he's only a few points away from P2 in the standings, having not actually won a Grand Prix this year. So he's having a fantastic year. That's consistency for you. But yeah, I think great call from George Russell today. I'm not even going to read my notes on the top two teams, because there's just so much that we've managed to discuss without, because it's mostly pit stops and things like that. I'm just trying to think if there were any incidents between Mercedes and Red Bull on track that we need to go over before I quickly do Perez in a second. But yeah, just a quick word, Dan, on the Russell call.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's his first year with the team. I know he's obviously had these years where he's been under the management of Mercedes while he was at Williams, but he's just settled so well over the course of this year, and 13 points behind Charles and Perez. Considering the cars they both have, and especially Charles at the start of the year and the machine that Perez has, that's incredible that George is there. And the fact he's 30 points clear of Hamilton. I know Lewis has had his fair share of bad luck this year, but it is Lewis Hamilton. So full credit to him across the season. And you're right, it was not a Mercedes call today. That was very much a George Russell in the moment, making the most of the pit lane being used for the safety car route. Very impressive stuff, and it's paid off for him. It was, while you were talking, it was kind of crossing my mind. I was thinking, is it worth Mercedes now? Possibly. I don't think they will, and I think today is case in point in that they let them race. But there's a chance Russell could get second in the standings. Is it beneficial for them? to give Russell preferential treatment. Not that I think they will, because Lewis Hamilton's been such an incredible servant to them, and they get on very, very well, it seems. And even today, though it was close between Hamilton and Russell when George went for the move, they keep it clean most of the time. It just, I don't know, it kind of crossed my mind because there's a real chance if they did move the cars around, they could finish with a driver in second in the Drivers' Championship, which I think, given where they were at the start of the year, would be an incredible achievement. But again, would they want to risk hurting that relationship with Lewis? I'm not too sure. But take nothing away from George. He's been just awesome this year. And again today, another really, really solid performance.
Yeah, deserves a lot of credit for that call. Absolutely. Thank you very much to Luke for your super chat. Says, I'm slightly concerned that professional racing drivers on Twitter are calling a conspiracy theory. Why would they risk exclusion for a single win? That's part of my argument as well, to be honest, Luke. 1 point in the championship, close run thing. If you got the slower car, you could maybe make that argument, but what was he at the start of this race? 93 points clear of his teammate in the championship. It doesn't matter if he doesn't finish this race. Max can go on holiday for most of the rest of the season now if he wants, and just come back to wrap it up later. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't even factor into my brain why you would even want to do that. But there you go. And thank you as well to, and this is his name, by the way, to Disabled Sean, who says, great race. When are we getting F1 Word merch? My new favourite F1 channel. How K-Mag kept going was crazy. Thank you so much, mate. We'll talk about K-Mag later. Just on the merch thing, I can't. If I release any merch, the channel then becomes like properly commercialised, and I would have to drop the name F1. To just take you very briefly through the terms and conditions of how Formula One work at FOM. So the only way I could do that is if I change the channel name. So I'd rather keep my name at the moment, although a rebrand probably isn't that far away, to be honest. Let's not get into that, though. Thank you, Sean, for your super chat, and everybody else as well. Charles Edward Cheese is still tipsy, I think. I think we're all right, though. So a few more likes, and he'll be able to get absolutely smashed. Yes, so the other thing as well, Sergio Perez. We've got to talk about Checo. I mean, defense against Lewis Hamilton was firm, very, very firm. Pretty close to a dramatic moment, let's put it like that. But ultimately this weekend, it's really the biggest criticism I've got of Red Bull as a team, if you want to say it, is that Perez is just been nowhere this weekend. He wasn't anywhere in qualifying. He made that mistake on his final run as well. He didn't have the pace today. What was he? Despite a late safety car, 5.1 behind Hamilton. Yes, he'd been battling, but 5.1 behind Hamilton, 18 seconds off his teammate. I mean, I read something before the race that Checo still has a different floor this weekend still to Max, so that could be part of it. But he's really fallen away lately, Checo, hasn't he, Dan? And it's a concern for me because we know how quickly Helmut Marko gets fed up, but then at the same time, Helmut Marko isn't exactly very complimentary about his second drivers. So I am just going to quickly read through my notes for him because I may as well. Pitted end of lap 14 onto the mediums. Hit the Ferrari wheel gun at the pit stop, which could have caused damage. The team are under investigation, by the way. Ferrari are for that one, so I will keep an eye on the FIA and see if they're probably going to get a fine for that. Lock up at turn 1 when Hamilton tried the move. That was the close moment. Squeezed him out. I think he left a car's width. I haven't got the image in my head. So I think he did leave a car's width there. Then pitted again. Then safety car pitted. Wide at the exit of turn 1, trying to pass Sainz. Just a bit of a... I suppose on the move with Sainz, it was a bit of payback, if you like, for the one that Checo put on Hamilton, even though Sainz was a bit more borderline than his was. But yeah, just a very quiet day. But I suppose you could argue, Dan, just on that holding up Hamilton, at least he did do what the team needed him to do when Hamilton came up behind him. But I've not got much else on him, to be honest. Really disappointed with him, particularly this weekend.
Yeah, I always find it hard to play Sergio because just like Valtteri Bottas when he was Lewis Hamilton's teammate, Sergio is up against a driver who is just on electric form at the moment. Max has been so good this season, and I would argue any driver on the grid would struggle to match him. So by default, Checo is always going to have a bit of a hard time. But you're right, this weekend wasn't great. It wasn't great. He's really got a car there that should be on the podium, and it never looked at any point really in the race today that he was even going to be able to challenge for it. Maybe before the safety car came out, possibly he would have been able to catch George, but it didn't feel convincing at any point. And again, when you consider without the safety car, how far Max would have been in front, or how clear he would have been to be on the podium. The fact that Checo wasn't in the mix is concerning. I think he's had an okay season, but it's hard to justify because again, Max has been so good that you don't expect Checo to beat him. You'd like him to be second place, and I think he's had 7 podiums now, which is a solid return, and he's level on points for second place in the championship, which we always said for every season with Bottas, as long as he's second, that's the best he can do. He's helping Red Bull currently lead the constructors' standings. He's not smashing the car up every weekend. I mean, even yesterday he had his spin, but didn't ruin the car. So I don't want to be too critical on Checo, but you're right. I'm just kind of left with wanting a little bit more. It's not quite tickled my fancy, not quite tickled my taste buds again with Checo. It's not as bad as it was with Gasly and Albon, where it was one weekend okay, one weekend poor, the next weekend fighting from the back. It's more consistent than that. But it's just not, I think, what you would want in that second Red Bull car. Ferrari, with all their issues, at least they've got 2 solid drivers there. Mercedes, Russell and Hamilton, both brilliant. And then I'm not criticising Checo. It's just, we've seen him at his best when he was at Racing Point, when he was at Force India. And I still don't feel 2 years down the line we're quite seeing that level of Sergio Perez at Red Bull.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his last few results just to kind of, 4th, 5th, 2nd and 5th. DNF in Austria. I mean, what will save Checo from a lot of criticism or scrutiny, or how I cannot say that word. I literally, if I write that word in a script, I have to change it because I can't say it. But you know what I mean. What will keep the eyes off him a little bit is the fact that both the championships are wrapped up. If this was a really close title fight, particularly the constructors, he'd be getting a lot more criticism for his performances because they'd be costly. But I'm just a bit disappointed with him at the moment. Hopefully he can turn it around. I still think he's the right man for that seat. I know he's contracted, so it's an irrelevant conversation in some ways, but can't always trust Red Bull with their contracts. So I don't think Checo needs to worry about his seat at the moment. I just he needs to up it. What we got? Italy, Singapore, Japan, USA, Mexico, Brazil, Abu Dhabi. I think someone said the other week, actually, let's hope that Checo gets it wrapped, or Max gets it wrapped up before Mexico, so Checo can win his home Grand Prix or something like that. But he'll need to up his pace, Sergio. He was involved in stuff today. Obviously, I've already mentioned the wheel gun thing for anyone that missed it, so it wasn't a completely dull race. It wasn't uneventful, but he really does need to be quicker. So, yes, we will look now to everyone's favourite team in the pit lane. Ferrari. I you know what? I'd just love to do one of these streams, Dan, where we're not talking about Ferrari doing something weird in the pits. We'll start with car. We should start with Leclerc, so we'll start with Leclerc actually. P3 today. Soft tyres at the end, made the right call as well. Closed the gap, got past Hamilton. Didn't look overly thrilled on the podium, as you'll see in a bit, but I've got nothing on him, really. I'll read you my notes. I can read you my notes. So, pitted at the end of lap 17 to the medium tyre. Second stop, end of lap 45 for the hard. Then safety car pit for the medium. Overtook Hamilton turn 1 on lap 66. I'm sure he had a much more eventful race than that, but it was just kind of typical of Ferrari's weekend in Zandvoort. They just they were there, but the pace just wasn't there. And I feel like we talk about Max Verstappen. We talk about how good he's been this year. We talk about Red Bull getting it right, and we talk a lot about Ferrari getting it wrong. But Max is as far clear in the championship as he is, just as much for Ferrari's cock-ups as he is for his own ability. Because if you follow what I'm saying, because Ferrari have really, really made some mistakes. And although Leclerc's race went without any real issue, Carlos Sainz, I made a joke in my I know me being sarcastic and joking, but Fernando Alonso, I put him down for a top 6 finish, which, by the way, I got right, and then said if Ferrari go for fastest lap again, they might get top 5. But actually, we still got a 5-second penalty for Sainz for an unsafe release in the pit stop, which was 100% an unsafe release. He was caught as well on lap 1, wasn't he, at the first corner by George Russell. No damage to the car there, little tag on the side pod. But the big thing that absolutely crippled his race was slow left rear, was what I wrote. 12.7 second pit stop. It wasn't a slow left rear. There wasn't a left rear. It's like Ferrari looked at their car on track and went, I reckon that's only got 3 wheels on it, let's get 3 tyres ready. I'm sure it wasn't. But it all sounds like, from what Sky was saying in commentary, or Ted was saying in commentary, that Ferrari had made the call so late that they kind of gone beyond the cutoff for when the mechanics can get the tyres out in time, but they've still brought him in. So somebody's tried to overrule that as a mechanic and the pit wall have ignored it, or nobody's made that call. And Binotto said on the pit wall while talking to Sky, it was a late call, mechanics were not ready. I mean, if you want a quote to sum up Ferrari's season in strategy, that's your quote.
I think as well, just how calm he was with that quote. I mean, you read it then, and it's you reading it, but you'd expect if it was Binotto for him to be quite disappointed. But it was kind of
he called it a mess as well.
Yeah, it was so strange, and you're right. The whole thing was a total mess, a disaster once again. And I know Sainz wasn't having a brilliant race anyway. But if this was the start of the season, you can't be making mistakes like that because they build up so quickly and points lost it becomes so costly within 1 or 2 races, mistakes like that. But it's happened all season long. But the thing that really sticks with me is that you're right, there was no tyre there. It was a silly call anyway. But the fact that there was no tyre there and all the other mechanics were just quite calm about it. It was almost as if, oh yeah, this has happened before. We're used to this. It's all fine. I'm sure it'll show up eventually. There was no panic. And yet you think Germany 2019, when Mercedes, it was the 1 minute pit stop. I know that's a bit longer, but there was chaos everywhere. People screaming, running around, people looking about. Nothing from that today from Ferrari. And I know it's 12 seconds compared to a minute, but you see teams have pit stops that are 4 seconds instead of 2, and they're devastated. It just looked like they were defeated. It just looked like they were so used to it and tired. And I think, again, Sainz's race was all over the place today, and the unsafe release that pretty much cost him any chance of real points. Also, just another mistake they didn't need. But even Leclerc's whole body language before the race didn't seem too confident. I feel into turn 1, there was not a real chance of overtaking Max. And the start of the season, we had several races where Charles and Max were really going at it head to head. You just didn't know who was going to come out on top. It just seems like the last 5 or 6 Grand Prix, ever since France, I would say, and then that big mistake from Leclerc, there's not been that fight at the front. Yes, yesterday was super close in quali, and that was brilliant. But as soon as Max got that 1 second lead, it just looks like Ferrari have nothing to be able to combat it. And they've kind of accepted defeat in that now. Because you're right, Leclerc did have a quiet day, and it's hard to really comment on it, but I don't think he's got the machinery. I'd love to say that they've given up on this year and they focused early on next season, but I still think it might be a little bit too early to say that. It's just been a continuous story and string of disasters for them, and I just don't think it's changing anytime soon. And as much as I'd love to say that there's still a chance of this championship happening, if this was a fully functioning Mercedes team from the last couple of years, I mean, Hamilton was it 40 points behind Max at this stage of the season last year? You know, you still kind of believe that it's going to happen. I know it's a bit bigger this year, but you just seem like there's no chance, because even if Leclerc had a perfect run through to the end, you would just know that there's going to be something wrong that happens to Ferrari, just like today. I know they don't have the car, but operationally, it's just not where it needs to be to fight for a championship.
Nick in chat, absolutely in my head. Nürburgring 1999, Eddie Irvine. That's exactly what I thought when it first happened. But what I would say is that shows progress for Ferrari, because Eddie Irvine, no tyres were there, but this weekend there were 3. Next weekend, they might have all 4 there. It's not fair to be like that about it, because I mean, Leclerc's pit stops were fine, weren't they? And Sainz's other ones, for the most part, were okay. So, yeah, but just a really weird... I've got nothing on Ferrari, really, other than just to complain about their weird calls again. And then also kind of still go back a few weeks to Mattia Binotto saying, no, we don't need to change anything in the strategy department. You what? Nothing. You don't even need to sit down with them and try and work out what's going on. Everything's fine. I mean, that's... I say delusional a lot at the moment on these streams, but that's pretty... If you're looking at the strategy decisions about your team and you're going, nah, it's all good. something not right there. So, yeah, I've also seen, and I think this is a fabulous question from, is it Slicks X? I've butchered that, so I'm so sorry. It says, was France Charles's Germany 2018? That's a really good question. First of all, some of you guys think so quickly. It's so good. Seb Vettel, of course, 2018 in Germany, straight into the wall. Was that Charles' moment this year for the championship? Was that it? Has it gone? I mean, you talk to, well, we don't, we're not that privileged, but people in the paddock talk to Charles Leclerc, and he's like, oh, it's a difficult thing. His face, his words are, we'll keep fighting every race. His face tells a very different story. He knows this championship is over. Was that his moment, like Vettel did in 2018? Is that's what thrown the rest of his season off? Because he knew that was his error. I mean, it's a good question. It's a fair question.
It's a great question, and I'm going to be really pedantic on this because I think the point of it is kind of saying, was that the moment where Charles just kind of accepted defeat? And I think that's right. I'm going to be pedantic in the fact that I've never quite believed that was the moment where Seb lost it in 2018, only because he did win Spa a couple of races later.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like now with Charles, you're right. I just seem like that mojo's gone. Like I said a minute ago, the first few races of the season, we did have these question marks going in. Will it be Max or will it be Charles? It doesn't matter who's on pole. There is going to be a race there. I just don't feel we've had that since France, since Paul Ricard. And on one side, that mistake, may have got to him a little bit. He may have had a bit of a talking to himself and said, I can't make these mistakes. Maybe I just need to hold back a little bit. But equally, in that same race, they made strategy mistakes with the other car. And it might just mean that, or might just be that behind closed doors, the confidence from everyone has gone. And from a public point of view, it looks like that as well, off track and on track. There's no confidence in Ferrari at the moment. And that's got to be felt within the garage, and definitely from the two drivers. Even Sainz today didn't really seem too surprised, or I would argue didn't really seem too disappointed with today's result, because it's just what Ferrari have been doing this year. So I think that's a great question. And I do think that it's that real turning point of the season, because before Paul Ricard, that there was a fight there. Since Paul Ricard, I think there's been a lot of internal, can't quite put my finger on the word, but looking at themselves and really criticising, and it's not been good for confidence, because it's really just gone pear-shaped since then. So yeah, great question.
Oh no, keep talking, Dan. I'm typing and I can't do two things at once.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yes, Leclerc could win all the remaining races and could be brilliant. But in fairness, at the start of the year, I will add this, I guess. At the start of the year, it did seem like there were circuits that suit Ferrari and suited Red Bull. It does seem that whatever upgrades Red Bull have made, away from the confidence issues at Ferrari, the upgrades at Red Bull have worked so well that it seems like every circuit is a Red Bull circuit now. So I don't think it's fully to blame at Ferrari, because Red Bull have been just an incredible machine, an incredible outfit this year. But those two things together, Red Bull at the top of their game, Ferrari not fully functioning, just like we saw with Seb against Mercedes all those years, it's a trend that does need to end if they want to really fight for a championship, because everything else, the car's not bad. They've got two brilliant drivers. But are you still typing?
No, I'm done, mate. I'm
okay,
thinking,
you're done.
How long can I just leave him talking before he's like, sure? I've just put in chat a quick poll. Who will finish P2 in the constructors? Obviously, if you listen to this later, you can't take part in the poll, but feel free to let me know in the comments who you think it will be, Ferrari or Mercedes. So there you go. Have some fun with that. We'll come back to the results a little bit later. Thank you very much to Sean again, who says only 237 likes. Don't forget to smash it. We're at 282 now. Charles is still alive, I think. I've seen him in chat, but keep those coming. Try and get to 500 so he takes a few more shots. Thank you as well to Card, who says, I really feel bad for a lot of people working at Ferrari. It feels like a corporate environment with good staff and horrible management. Thank you very much for your super chat. It's a mess, isn't it? From the outside looking in. Maybe on the inside it is all fantastic, but just doesn't feel like that from the outside looking in. Thank you as well to Slicks, is how I pronounce it. No problem at all, mate. Says you do you guys do a great job here. Thank you very much, Slicks. Appreciate the support in the super chats tonight. Lots of them coming in, so thank you so much. I always try to get to chat to read them out, but obviously super chats, I will always read them out unless it's abusive, and then I will just tell you to go away. But so far, so good. Let's roll on to Alpine then. Alonso and Esteban Ocon, P6 and P9. That name again was Esteban Ocon. His full name is Esteban, of course. So not a lot on Ocon really in my notes. P12 to P9 by the end of lap 1, so a really good start. Pitted end of lap 18 onto the hards. Didn't pit under safety car initially, as I recall, because he was on the hard tyre and was ahead of Alonso a few places. So I was sort of wondering if that was an odd call from Alpine, but then it did pit him under the second safety car anyway. Full safety car, obviously first full safety car, second overall because it was a VSC. You know what I mean. But I think a decent race from Ocon today. Was told to push late on to get Sainz because he had the 5-second penalty. Get this, 0.2 of a second away, so he needed 0.2, and that would have been a few more points there for Alpine. But to be fair, Norris 7th and Ricciardo God knows where. That's actually still a very good result for Alpine. And Fernando Alonso passed both the AlphaTauris by the end of lap 11, which was quite an important part of his race, I feel. But he did pit at the end of lap 12 to the hard tyre. Looked like a one-stopper, Dan. I think that's what they were going for. Surprising pace on the hard tyre, which I think is what... I feel like Alonso's pace on that hard, and maybe a few other drivers as well, is what made some of the front runners think, oh, maybe we do need to give that tyre a go, because it was surprisingly quick, especially when you consider the pace the hard tyre had in Hungary. Ferrari were like, oh, no. Did actually undercut Ocon as well because of that. So that was quite a good call. That's how good his pace was. Did make a VSC stop, like I say, to go into the soft, so he wasn't on the one stopper in the end. And I've got this for Norris and I've got it for Alonso, so you're going to hear it twice. Really nice little scrap between those two. I do like watching Alonso fight with anybody, but there's a few drivers. Lando Norris is one of them. I really like watching him battle with Leclerc a couple of years ago, when Leclerc was still, or a few years ago now, when Leclerc was still at Alfa Romeo. I love watching the old dogs, if you like, Alonso and Vettel, scrappy on track, but I really enjoyed that Alonso-Norris fight. But really good weekend for Alpine. Again, I mean, I'm going to go back to my stats. Let's have a look. Where are we? Alpine have had both. So, I'll try that again. The DNF for Ocon in Silverstone aside, Alpine have had 2 drivers in the points at every race since Baku. They are having such a bloody good season. They really are. Yeah, all right, fine. They didn't at Silverstone because of that retirement, but, still, what a run for them. And that's why they are rapidly getting fairly comfortable. 24 points clear now in the constructors. Have been so good. That's consistency for you. They're kind of like the team version of George Russell. Consistency. Alp Russell.
Yeah.
Alp Russell. Ruspine. Oh no. Never mind.
Good
Move
job.
Dan, quick
Good job,
Dan.
Sean. Well, you're right. That outfit has been improving as the year's gone on, and I think Mercedes have definitely been one that have continued to improve, Alpine and Red Bull. But in that midfield where it's been up and down for most teams, Alpine have been the one that really have asserted themselves as that best of the rest. And you're right, 24 points now in front of McLaren, but that also doesn't seem like it's slowing down at any point. Alonso seems to be driving at the best level he has for quite some time. But also, I think Ocon is going under the radar this year. He's been super consistent. And you're right, his strategy was a little bit different today, but had a brilliant start. I think they said in commentary, though they didn't show it, that Ocon went around the outside of the banking at turn 3 and over to a couple of cars. He made 3 positions on lap 1 and was there with Stroll at one point, and both of them were having a good start to the race, only tucked in behind the top 5 or 6 and Norris. So great start from Ocon and Alonso. You're right, brave on those hard tyres. And don't forget, it was only a couple of races ago in Hungary where they made that decision and it all went so wrong. So fair play to Alpine for trying that again. This time it really, really did pay off for them. But it feels like it's deserved considering all the chaos that's been going off track. It's nice that what really counts, which is the car and the race on a Sunday, that's working for them. And I think whoever they end up with next year, they're definitely going to inherit a good car. Ocon, like I said, has been consistent this year. I think he was definitely a driver that when it was under Renault and more so when it was Force India, had a crash in him occasionally. I think that consistency's there now. I think he's a solid midfield driver and has certainly been a strong match for Alonso this year and is still in front of him in the standings, only by 7 points, but it's still there. I think the target for them now, of course, is fourth. But I think for Ocon and Alonso is, can they catch Norris in the drivers? And though there's not many races left, the pace that's in that car, the consistency of that car, and the inconsistency of the McLaren, I'd say they have a great shout. Mercedes definitely too far off for them, but a comfortable fourth, I think Alpine take that.
Absolutely. I can't disagree with that. I think it's a great season, isn't it? For Alpine, I really do think it is, and I think they're looking good. I mean, it can swing. We'll see, but we'll talk about McLaren while we're talking about that championship fight. I've got a few notes on Norris, mostly about that lovely fight with Fernando Alonso, nice and scrappy. Pitted at the end of lap 17 for the hard virtual safety car stop as well for the soft. Just one of those days again, and sometimes I struggle to get notes down for McLaren, and I feel like I feel under a bit of pressure to do it because they're a big team and they've got a lot of fans. But Norris has got this habit for large parts of this season, could argue most of it, of just being in the right place at the right time, having the pace he needs when the car's underneath him, delivering the laps he needs to in qualifying and in the race, and getting strategy right with the team. And that kind of sums up Norris quite nicely for the most part this season. And today was another one of them. He was on the one stopper, probably would have been around 7th place anyway, but was only half a second off Alonso for P6, and actually not that far off Sergio Perez either, a second back. So really great race from Norris once again. And I think he's having another great season. I don't know. He's having a great season. There's no doubt about that, but I don't know how much of it looks a million times better because his teammate is having such a terrible season. I'm not saying Norris only looks good because Ricciardo's bad. I'm just saying that he's having a great season, but how great is it? Kind of like, it's a really crap comparison, so please forgive me, chat, and everyone listening. Kind of like we say about Mick Schumacher and Mazepin last year, how much of that was Mick and how much it was his teammate was terrible. If you put Alonso in that McLaren alongside Norris, they're a lot closer, aren't they, is what I'm saying, Dan. But that, please don't think I'm taking anything away from Norris. He's been superb this season. As for Ricciardo, pitted end of lap 28 for the hards. Is literally all I have in my notes, and he came home in 17th, 4/10 behind Zhou. 37 seconds off the leader. I'm just trying to look at the gaps. I mean, yeah. I did see something on Twitter, which I will mention on Ricciardo, I suppose, if you want me to talk about something to do with him. Did see something from F1 TV, I think a graphic that said Daniel Ricciardo, and then underneath says something like struggling again, McLaren, which I'm guessing was something cheeky that wasn't supposed to. A bit like the thing on BBC News a few weeks back when they had an intern in practicing with the system and they wrote Manchester United are rubbish and then sent it live, which upset a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, what do you want to say on McLaren, mate? You might have some more notes on them than I've got, but like I say, just typical Norris race today. Right place, right time, perfect strategy. Great lap in qualifying, great laps in the race. Ricciardo, nowhere. I mean, should I clip that and just use that in every single race reaction? Because that's what it feels like.
It does. And I don't want to say it's getting tedious, but it almost is. And it's strange because that car at times this year has been bloody quick. I mean, it's really, really bizarre how they've had such highs and such lows. Ricardo out in Q1, I know there was a bit of dust on his tyres or something. I didn't quite catch the full story on why he was out in Q1, but it's still not great. And it's not a new story that he's struggled on a Saturday. But then on a Sunday with Danny Rick, you've always expected him, especially was in Renault, but also Red Bull, he would be able to fight his way through the field. And that killer instinct of Danny Rick has certainly gone. And he's definitely counting down these races now until it's over. I know from a public point of view, it's not clear whether he's here next year or not. I think behind closed doors, that's probably done and dusted. He is still a driver.
I think there's a question mark at the moment, Dan, about whether he's going to be in that car to the end of the season.
Well, I think that's a right question mark to have. I think when you've got Piastri on the sidelines in a season where arguably he would have no pressure because he can get in that car and be at the back of the grid, you can just say it's experience. What's Danny Rick going to be able to achieve with these last 8 races? Maybe he could score some points and help them with the fight with Alpine. But when you look at how far he is off Norris at the moment, I feel Piastri is going to be able to do at least that, if not better. And that's no disrespect to Ricciardo, because I think most of us still think there's a solid race driver in there. It's just not worked out, and his confidence, bless him, is absolute rock bottom. So I don't want to go in on him too harshly this weekend. But even K-Mag today, who made plenty of mistakes, Seb Vettel as well, didn't have the cleanest of races. At least they had moments where they were overtaking cars and there was some sort of movement there. It just seemed all race long that Danny Rick was at the back with your Latifis, with your Seb and your Magnussen, and yet Danny Rick didn't make any mistakes. It was just his pure pace. So that is concerning, and it is horrible to see. But you're right. How much is it Danny Rick struggling? How much is it Norris being great? Because he was awesome today. And that car, again, I know it was quick at times and it has technically scored a podium this year, but it's not as quick as those top three cars. I would argue it's not as quick as the Alpine. And in fairness to Norris, you're right, he was in the mix with the two Alpines and Perez, but after Sainz had dropped back with that 12-second stop, Norris was matching him. And it was only about a 2-second gap for the majority of the Grand Prix today. Norris was keeping him honest, and that in itself was very, very impressive. A super consistent drive again from Lando. I think we all know what he's about now. He's proved himself. 75th Grand Prix. Crofty said, "Where's the time gone?" And it was a rare occasion where I kind of agreed with him. I was like, "Where has the time gone?" He really, yeah, he really has asserted himself within that team. And you're right. I think questions maybe should start to be at least asked about Danny Rick for the remainder of this year. I would keep him personally just to keep things, well, sensible and not trying to boil things over for the rest of the year. I don't know. I think that's too much adding fuel to the fire to get rid of him, but it's not great. And 13th in the standings, 1 point in front of Gasly, behind Vettel in that dog of an Aston Martin car. I mean, that's borderline embarrassing for Danny Rick, and no one wants that for Ricciardo. So, yeah, it's mixed bag again for McLaren. But as you've said, it just seems like we've said that every single race this year.
I think a lot of us are guilty of this, and I want to make the point. He's a lovely guy. He makes a lot of people laugh, and he's always got a smile on his face for the most part. Do you feel sometimes like he doesn't get the criticism he deserves? Because if that was a let's have a look at somebody. If that was a Tsunoda, or that was a Sainz, or that was a Latifi, I mean, Latifi's got his own problems, but if that was a Latifi, people would tear into him every single week. And I'm guilty of saying it, Dan, you're guilty of saying it, John T is, Stuart is. He's a lovely guy, so you sort of feel bad going in on him, but actually, to be fair, he has been pretty terrible this year. He's been, and that's even an understatement. He has been awful when you look at his teammates. I mean, you look at their see, and you know, people blame the car, and I can understand that, and maybe there is a car issue to it, but that can't be everything. I mean, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 points finishes this season versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for Norris, and one of those was a podium. Do you know what I mean? I know it's very easy to say he's a nice guy and I don't like to say it, but we would be absolutely tearing into Bottas if that was, in fact, I have torn into Bottas when that was Bottas. So I think the criticism is deserved. And I think maybe I mean, you said it when we were talking about Lewis Hamilton earlier. Who are we to sit here and criticise these drivers? I mean, I often make the joke I wouldn't get one leg in one of these cars, let alone be able to drive it. But he deserves to be properly criticised for his performances this year. And I think if you sat down with Daniel Ricciardo, he'd probably be very critical of his performances this year, which is, I guess, a bit of an irony, given that a lot of fans won't.
Yeah, that is very, very true. I would maybe counteract that, though, because I mean, and I know you agree with this. I think they're all lovely on the grid this year. I think we've got a really good bunch of drivers at the moment in Formula One. I would say the difference, though, and I suppose why he escapes a little bit more criticism than some of the other drivers you mentioned, is that he has been there and done it before. I think you've got drivers like Yuki and Latifi, Schumacher a little bit this year that are fairly new and are still proving themselves. But Ricciardo, we have seen him at his very best. He's won races at Red Bull. I don't want to count his McLaren win because that was a different scenario. But at Red Bull, he really did have some deserved victories there. And even in the Renault, which I would argue is a more similar time to his McLaren time, he was fighting in that midfield and scoring solid points in a new team, a new environment, and still there were glimpses of that Danny Rick of old because he hadn't left yet. So I think that's why maybe he's still cut a little bit more slack than other drivers because we have seen him at his very best. And I think there is still that hope and desire that he could still do that. But you're right, he shouldn't escape criticism whatsoever because it has been awful. Last year, I feel you could give it a pass because it was that first year. Now we're 1.5 seasons in, and it's just been the same story. And we've had glimpses like that win in Monza, where you think, is this going to be the turning point? That race this year in Melbourne, where he'd struggled at the start of the year, got big points in Melbourne, and you think this is it. This is where he's kicking on now. He's managed to keep up with Lando all weekend, but there is no consistency. And you're right, that is more than fair to criticize. But I don't, though he is lovely and he is so funny and he's such a big character in Drive to Survive or his interviews or whatever, I just feel, from my point of view at least, maybe I'm not as harsh because I think he is a driver that we have seen before, can be mixing it up with the very best. A little bit like with Seb in his, was it his last year with Ferrari? I think it was, when he was so far off Leclerc, fighting back with the Alfa Romeos. You don't want to be too harsh because you know he is a driver that is a 4-time world champion, has mixed it up with the best in that team, but for whatever reason, it wasn't working that particular season. So you cut them a little bit more slack is kind of where I would come from. But your overall point, I fully agree with. He shouldn't escape criticism because this year has been awful. And it's going under the radar, which I feel is maybe the point you're kind of trying to make there, in that when you actually look at the standings and see 19 points compared to Lando's 82, and when you see that he's in the mix with Vettel, behind K-Mag, yeah, it is very concerning. And any other driver in the car, I mean, if that was Piastri next year, you'd be saying, well, it wasn't worth it. So, yeah, I definitely understand your point.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he's not getting criticised. He is getting criticised, but and I'm not saying that you should be hating on drivers or anything like that. But I feel like you put other drivers in that situation we've seen, and there feels like there's more. What I'm saying is it seems to be bookended a lot with he's a really nice guy and look at what he achieved.
Yeah,
how many years ago now at Red Bull? And you think, yeah, and it's the same with the Vettel thing. I totally get your point, Dan, and I agree to a point, but it's always like, you know, we don't want to go too hard on Seb because he won 4 championships. It's like, yeah, 2010 to 2013. It's now 2022. I mean, Seb don't care. He's off now. He's off for a retirement holiday. He's perfectly fine, is Seb. I'll just read a couple of these before we crack on with the rest of the teams. I've had another couple of super chats in. Thank you to AC for 2. You are the 2 super chats. Thank you very much, AC. First one says Red Bull will make a Seb-like era with Max until 2026. Ooh. Lewis will retire eventually. Ferrari will just be Ferrari. Charles should rework this dream of winning with the red car. Binotto should go. Some predictions and some interesting stuff there from AC, who also then goes on to say Danny Rick is just like Thor in the Avengers Endgame. He just needs to find his mojo back. I've never watched Avengers Endgame, so I'm just going, yes, I agree. Never seen it. Who's next after that one? I just see a couple of the points in chat. I wanted to just answer somebody who I think is a little bit behind, so I do want to answer it because it's only fair. I'm not going to find it now. I was basically saying my rant was pointless because drivers get lucky, blah, 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 blah. My rant wasn't pointless because it's my opinion, but also I think we were pretty clear that there was luck involved, so I don't really know what the point is there. But thank you anyway for your opinion. It's greatly appreciated. Anyway, we've done McLaren. Who was after McLaren? Aston Martin. Do you know what? I'm going to sum this up in a very quick sentence for you, Dan, for Aston Martin. A race that promised much for Lance Stroll, but didn't really deliver in the end. He did get a point, which is good, but there was a lot of talk pre-race about how he was expected to challenge McLaren on pace today, and I don't think he was a million miles away from that, but it never really came to anything more than P10, which, by the way, is still a good result. It's still P10. It's still a point on the board for Lance. Started 10th, finished 10th, but what I mean by didn't really deliver is because a lot of pre-race was talks about how much pace he was going to have, and it didn't really come. Seb Vettel and the other Aston just had, I think, a pretty miserable day, to be honest. Pitted early, as a lot of people did, from the soft to the medium. Had contact with Bottas at turn 1. Wheel-to-wheel with Mick Schumacher as well, that almost came to contact. Was a lovely fight. We'll get to that later when we talk about Mick. But just a really... While Seb was involved in a lot, it wasn't for much. Does that make sense, Dan? He was involved in a lot, but it wasn't for much because he was ultimately P14. But credit to Lance for P10. I think it's my disappointment rather than Aston failing to deliver, because I thought coming into the race, Lance was going to be much quicker than that and maybe could have been challenging, Norris and Alonso and Ocon. But maybe it's just my Stroll bias.
Possibly, but I feel the same. And I think maybe you're being slightly harsh on Lance in the fact that I feel in that opening phase of the race, he was in the mix and he did make, I think it was 2 overtakes on that opening lap and was in front of Ocon, in front of Alonso, in front of Norris. And it looked at a phase like he was going to be able to challenge. But strategy, I feel, did not go his way today, and it never really recovered from there. And you're right, out of the 2 Aston Martins, it seemed like it was Seb that was getting all the attention, kind of for the wrong reasons. It seemed like, I mean, he made a couple of overtakes into turn 1 and had a great fight, as you said, with Mick Schumacher. There was, I would say, that a clumsy moment with Lewis Hamilton, the blue flags. That was quite uncharacteristic for Seb, but with all of those sort of instances with blue flags, how much is that the driver? How much is that the engineer not giving information? And we've not heard enough about that yet. So I don't want to be fully critical on Seb, but maybe considering he was so far back, a Mercedes and a Red Bull in your wing mirrors possibly should have thought better of that. But I think with all the races he's had and the fact he's coming to the end of his career, I'll cut him a little bit of slack, but not his proudest moments. But you're right. A lot of promise with Aston Martin this weekend. It seemed like it was going to be one of those where they were going to score some good points with both cars. Seb today wasn't great, but yesterday with the mistake, that was disappointing for him because that car did seem to have more pace than it's had for quite a lot of this year. And they're not a million miles away from AlphaTauri. So 9th and 8th place, considering where they've been the last few years, okay, isn't brilliant. But going into next year, the difference between 9th and 8th place is a fair chunk of money. So in fairness to them, they do want to be scoring as many points as possible. Considering I suppose the promise of the start of the weekend, I think they'd be fair enough to be a little bit disappointed with the end result.
Do you know, I've just gone back to try and find the notes on Seb because I've not got anything in here about him messing up under blue flags and ignoring them. They're under the Lewis notes, which we dismissed because we had so much to talk about already. So yeah, I need to mention that one then. So Sebastian Vettel, first of all, I don't think it would have meant Lewis was going to win the race. I don't think it would have changed anything there. But Sebastian Vettel out of the pits with all his experience and his 4 world championships, Dan, comes out of the pit lane in front of Hamilton, the race leader, and just doesn't shift out of the way. And I know it's not an easy track to get out of the way on, but I feel like he could have done something on the exit, before turn 3, or maybe he could have gone low in turn 3 to let them through. I know he's got his own race to run, but that was a 5-second penalty, and it's a slam dunk penalty. I don't think somebody in chat will now go, no, it was never a penalty, mate. But I'm pretty sure most people will agree that was 100% a penalty for Seb Vettel, whether it's easy to get out of the way or not. And it wouldn't have had a drastic impact on his results because that would have put him up there with Albon, I think just ahead of Albon, maybe 6 tenths behind. So I don't think it would have changed his result. But obviously, I don't know how that would have impacted his race because we didn't see where he was at that point, really, after that, and what he did after that. Would he, without the penalty, have been able to, I don't know. There's lots of that. I will read Seb's notes. I said, we did not have great race pace today. It probably could have earned a better result if we had not started so far back. Of course, qualifying again, seeming to catch Aston Martin out. I know Seb made the mistake in quali, but not the first time this season, going into Saturday with some great pace and then not delivering on a Saturday in qualifying, which is really, really weird. Strategy would have worked, but the first pit stop was really slow, so we had a slow stop as well. Lost time to Zhou and Gasly. Albon, Schumacher were very close to Ricciardo. Enjoyed my battle with Mick, but this race was not a highlight for either of us. Then I got a 5-second penalty for ignoring blue flags when I was being passed by Hamilton, but it did not really make much difference to my race. Tough day. And Lance Stroll says, overall, it has been a positive weekend in terms of performance, but we were a little bit unlucky today with how things played out and how that affected our strategy. The timing of the safety car gave the Alpines and Norris the advantage. Without that, we could have been fighting for 7th. Our pace was strong all weekend. I felt really confident in the car. We were more competitive. That is really encouraging for the coming races. Kind of wish I'd have read that before I made my comment about him not having a pace to challenge, but without the safety car, maybe he would have been by the sounds of it for Lance. So I retract my statement about it being a bit disappointing. Lance had a better race than I thought he did. So well done to Lance Stroll. Do you know what? I'm going to say this, right? I wasn't going to, because we're going back a few years now, but the thing that impressed me most mouthed about Lance Stroll this weekend was the fact that, and I've been saying this on this channel since about 2018, he needs to sort his Saturdays out. Guess what he did yesterday, everyone? He sorted his Saturday out. Great qualifying from Lance Stroll. So big kudos to him there as well. So really good weekend for Stroll overall. Please do leave a like, by the way. 359 so far. We need to get to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. He's getting impatient. He wants another shot. So please do drop a like. Always appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Of course, we're building up to Italy next. It's the preview on Thursday. And then, of course, race reaction again next Sunday. And then it's quiet for a couple of weeks because we've got a gap on the calendar that was never filled. So 2 weeks with no F1. Which is going to be weird at this stage of the season. Then it's chaos to the end of the year. So, yeah, please do subscribe. Don't forget to drop a like, as I say. So, next up, we are going with, as he looks intently at his board and hopes he gets it right, AlphaTauri. I know we've kind of already talked about AlphaTauri in this, but we've got to go for it again. How'd you sum it up, Dan? Gasly P11, Tsunoda we'll get to in a moment. We'll do Gasly first. I might have some quotes actually I can read you. So we don't put our foot in our mouth, Dan. I'll read what Gasly has to say about his race before we comment on it. Finishing P11 is never a great feeling. We had tried our best to make it into the points, but I don't think we quite had the pace to make it possible today. Ultimately, we are looking a little bit off performance compared to the other cars around us. We lost some time in the first stint and struggled on the mediums in traffic. I think there are still some positives to take away from this weekend, though. We knew this was going to be a track we would struggle on, but the pace on the Haas this afternoon looked competitive. We are now heading to Monza for the last of the European races. Is it the last of the European races? No. Good. I like the flyaways. The timings are a bit more interesting than the same time every week. So that's what Pierre said. P11, 4.5 seconds off the points. We did see some interesting battling with him as well. It wasn't a lonely race totally for Pierre, was it? He was involved in stuff. I've just got nothing in my notes, Dan. At all. I've got plenty for Tsunoda. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I feel like Gasly was always on the fringes today. There's a couple of moments where the Alpines were getting past where I feel he moved a little bit late into turn one. It was borderline, but it was okay. It was hard racing. I don't believe it's being investigated, so he's got away with that one. And in all fairness, the car isn't brilliant. It's really not. It's definitely not the AlphaTauri of last season that was able to go 6th, 5th, 4th in qualifying. It's definitely not that beast. So with question marks about Gasly's future and where this car is and where his potential car for next year might be, I could understand why he might want to be thinking about jumping ship potentially, because it's, I would argue, becoming more and more likely that they're going to finish 9th in the Constructors' Championship. And it seems like McLaren, we always say the same thing. Seems like we're saying the same thing for AlphaTauri most weekends as well, is that they've got an okay car, but not quite good enough for points. And that's really starting to build up. And whereas Aston, on terms of pace, had a good weekend this weekend, I've not felt like AlphaTauri have had that for quite some time. I feel it was Baku, the last real weekend where they had both cars fully on it and expecting points for both. Seems like they're kind of going on a bit of a whim these days and trying some brave strategies, bold strategies. Today, it always seemed like they were together, both Yuki and Pierre, but never quite seeming confident they were going to score points.
Yeah, sorry, I need to wait for my fan to turn off because I got a bit warm, Dan. No, I mean, we've got to talk about Yuki as well, haven't we? And I said, well, we'll do the specifics on Yuki. Whether you think it is a conspiracy or not is entirely up to you. Some people seem to think it's naive. If you don't think it's a conspiracy, I think it's really naive to think that it is, because I don't believe that could be orchestrated. Because what we're saying is, going back to that conspiracy, is, all right, it didn't play. What we're saying, that somebody at Red Bull went down to AlphaTauri and said, tell him to get going again after he stopped, because we want to win this with Max and we need a safety car. I mean, really? Because that's what you're ultimately saying, is that you think somebody's gone down from Red Bull, which is fine, but the FIA monitors the radio. So somebody will have picked up on that. So the only other way to do it is if somebody walks to the pit wall and does it, or into the garage, and you're saying nobody's going to pick up on it. I just don't. There's too many ifs around it. If Christian Horner was down at AlphaTauri chatting to Franz Tost 10 minutes before that happens, yeah, let's have the conversation. Let's do it. Yeah, they could have sent a text message. They could have done, but ultimately, again, that's evidence. They're not going to want to leave a paper trail, as we used to call it. If you still call it paper trail in this digital age we're in.
Yeah.
I don't know, but they're not going to want to do that. I think it was all very convenient, and I will always say this, I will completely sympathise with everyone that says it's a bit suspicious. It is a bit suspicious, but I don't believe it's a conspiracy. Fishy was the word I used. Something felt weird. But what felt weird to me was just AlphaTauri having an absolute mare, because Yuki came in. So you didn't see it. Yuki came in, pitted, they changed his tyres. The tyres appeared to be fitted. He then went out on track and said the tyres weren't fitted over the radio, pulled over to the side of the track, undid his seatbelts, because like Leclerc did at Barcelona a few years ago, ready to get out of the car. And then the team said over the radio, car's fine, basically come back to the pits. So Yuki gets going again, drives the car back to the pits, they pit him, they change his tyres, they do up the seatbelt, they send him out again, and then a few corners later, he stops on track. Now, I can completely understand why, specifically if you are a Mercedes fan, you're going to think, hang on a minute, come on. But to answer the question, why did they send him out? A lot of teams would. A lot of teams would in that situation. If you think if your driver says over the radio, tyres are loose or tyres are not fitted, and then you look at the telemetry and say, no, it's all fine, mate. Start the engine, bring it back to the pits, we'll check. Of course you're going to do that. And if they don't see anything in the pit stop that's wrong with that car, which I'm assuming they didn't, we can't know for sure, then you're going to send your car out again. Stopping on track. I mean, also, if you want to talk conspiracy, why did he stop right next to a escape road? He could have stopped in the middle of the track. He could have stopped in the middle of turn 3. He didn't. He picked an escape road. Do you know what I mean? You want conspiracy. I said it before. Go back and watch Singapore 2009. That was the ultimate conspiracy, because it was a conspiracy. It was absolutely deliberate by Renault. But that's what I mean. There are several things that I can see to look at both sides of the argument why you might suspect that. But then I look at the other side of it and think, yeah, again, why stop next to an escape road? Or not to make it too obvious. But you're all saying it's a conspiracy anyway. So, you think it was obvious too. So I just don't buy into it. I think it's people that you can go if it's boring, mate. We'll do it again next week. But I'm just making the point to make sure that everyone understands that I'm not saying that you are. I'm not saying you can't have your opinion. I'm just making the point that I just don't agree with it. I do not believe there is anything there. I just believe that it takes away from the conversation we should be having. Should drivers be undoing their seatbelts? And if a driver has undone their seatbelt, then should there not be a rule in place that they must radio to the team, I've undone my seatbelt, too late? I guess my argument being, when your driver pulls over and undoes his belts, should that be it? Game over. Race is done. Whether you can get the car going or not, or whatever you're told over the radio, if you've undone your belts, that's it. You get out of the car, your race is over. Because that's the thing that, all this talk of conspiracies, that's the bit, and I know it'll annoy Jonty as well to a point, that's the bit that bugs me more than anything, is the fact that despite what happened with Leclerc a few years ago, we don't appear to have learned the lessons from that. So as far as I'm concerned, just to repeat the point again, as soon as Tsunoda undid his belts, it should have been game over. At which point, by the way, it would still have been a virtual safety car. So all this talk about, well, why did they bring him in to then send him out again to cause a virtual safety car? If he stops there, it's still a virtual safety car. That's why it doesn't make sense. So that's the bit I'm more angry at, is that they're sending drivers out, or sending drivers back round again with this, especially somewhere like Zandvoort, where the track's so narrow, blind corners, blind crests. Somebody hits him, or he hits somebody else. He's at slow speeds. The closing speeds from the car coming from behind, I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about. So that's the bit I'm most annoyed at, is the fact that the seatbelts, he was allowed to do that. And I know they've got primary belts and secondary belts and probably a million belts there that probably keep him safe. But I hope the FIA have a word on this one, because that is unacceptable for me more than anything else, Dan.
Well, and you say it's extremely...
Oh, exciting. Sorry, Dan. Got to block some people. You carry on, mate.
Well, no, it's as you mentioned there, fully agree with everything you've just said. But of all the circuits, I mean, Zandvoort in itself is extremely dangerous. But Sector 2, where you start heading down the hill, a blind corner, the speeds he was going were so slow compared to every other car once he got going again. Those seatbelts not done up rightly, that could really cause some serious damage to Yuki. And like you say, then the conversation starts to come about. why the seatbelts are in place, what can we do in the future. But it's just going to be like Leclerc in Barcelona, and nothing's going to change. And we always say that with Formula One, just like we do with sausage curds. It's a similar debate. Nothing will change until something serious happens, which is a shame. And you'd like to think with this kind of incident, F1 might be a little bit more proactive on it. Is that wishful thinking, though? Probably, which is a real shame with this sport. But I suppose I don't want to just repeat all with what you've just said, because I think it was perfect. I think what I found strange on top of that was the fact that Yuki's obviously come out of the pit lane, felt there's something wrong. And again, with the Formula One broadcast, it's not my favorite. I always have lots of criticisms with it and how they present it. And it's a little bit unclear with what's going on at times, especially with team radio. I don't quite understand why he's pulled over and waited so long. If your tyre's off, your tyre's off. If a driver feels like that, your tyre's off, he reports back to the team, tyres off, they say pull over, you're done, game over. It seems very, very strange to pull over and to wait as long as he did to then get back into the race. And I don't want to start the conspiracy conversation again, because yes, I agree with you. What would be the point for Red Bull to even do that? And also, if you really, really, really think that way, a few laps later, Bottas retired, the ex-Mercedes driver, and it's gone into Mercedes' favour. So, it's very easy to get carried away with those things. But just the whole initial start of the event, the communication there was awful. And it seemed, even when Yuki was trundling back to the pit lane, and I mentioned it earlier on for people that weren't here, when he did eventually come in and seatbelts were checked and he eventually got going again, even then, he was still going slow. And he said something wasn't right. Why he didn't feel like that on the way back to the pit lane, or there wasn't any communication with the team with what was wrong. Very, very, very strange. And if this was any other team, if it was Ferrari, we'd be extremely critical. And I think, as you've just said, AlphaTauri, rightly so, need to look at themselves here. And I think there needs to be some form of investigation, because something's not quite right. And it could have been an extremely dangerous crash or incident if something had happened, especially on a circuit like Zandvoort. So lots of questions still. I don't want to go too deep into it, because I feel this is one of those that more is going to come out over the next few days. But certainly it's odd. I'll definitely say that. And I'm not impressed with how AlphaTauri handled it today.
No, that's my issue with the belts. And I think just on a conspiracy thing, just to finish it off, I think my issue here is that I've got sucked into vintage F1 word, and I've got sucked in by the minority bitching about it and not looking at the majority in chat, who are just like, you can see the argument, but seems to be, but yeah, it's just not there for me. So I'll stop it now. That I'm not going to pander to the minority. I keep saying I won't, and then I do it. But there you go. Not much more on AlphaTauri. So we will absolutely fly through these last three, because I think this is about as easy as it gets. Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi down at Williams. I better have a look on my page at me notes. So Albon started 15th. Latifi started 20th.
Yes.
Yep. No, Albon P12 today, 3.3 seconds behind Gasly, couple of seconds, 2.5 seconds up the road from Mick. Latifi last a lap down, the only driver a lap down, actually. I've got nothing. I mean, I'll have a quick look and see if there's anything in their press release. Generally speaking, there isn't an awful lot other than, I guess, what you'd expect, really. Let's see. Albon didn't have high expectations going into the race, so wasn't expecting points, really. We didn't expect much from a high downforce circuit. As we saw at Belgium, we might see it at Monza. That's a very slippery car, so they might have a good weekend next time. Yeah, happy with the car, despite just lacking a bit of grip at times. There's still a bit... bit of lap time. I read that completely wrong. There's still a little bit to find, but we can work on this and look at what we can do. And Nicholas Latifi, it was just a race to forget, really. Soundbite for Nicholas Latifi's season, bless him. We've been struggling with pace the whole weekend, and it's quite confusing to me as to why. Due to the issue in qualifying, we didn't really get the chance to see where we would have been on pace. So, yeah, sorry, Williams fans. I've got nothing, unless you've got 10 seconds down anything you've got on Williams. They were there, which is nice.
Yeah, they were there. I think they were honest that, this is a track that's absolutely nothing like Spa. They did very well in Spa. It's the kind of circuit that suits their car. Zandvoort complete polar opposite, but Monza could be a track that suits them. And I think Williams are very honest with the machine they have this year. No doubt Albon has had the edge over Latifi, and I don't want to say Nicholas has been found out a little bit this year, but I kind of feel like there's not been much promise. At least when George was there, you felt like George had been there a few seasons and was Mercedes' next golden child. Alex has come back and has done brilliant this year. He really, really has. And Latifi was nowhere, bless him, this weekend. So disappointing for him. But again, it's not a track they're hoping for much. And next weekend's, I think, one where already their focus would have been on Monza as opposed to Zandvoort anyway.
Yep, Mick Schumacher 13th, Kevin Magnussen 15th. Sorry, that was very dismissive, Dan. I listened to every word, mate, I promise.
No,
you
did
like,
the right
I've
thing.
got nothing to say.
The right thing.
Slow first stop for Mick Schumacher, 10 seconds. So that's cost him, looking at how things panned out. 2.6 behind Albon, 3.3 behind Gasly, who was he could have been on the fringes of points today, Mick. Also not helped by the fact he then had a slow second stop at 4.9 seconds. So that's 15 seconds nearly that Mick Schumacher's lost in the pits. With all that, he could, had he got some overtakes done, could have found himself on the fringes of points today. But I think, as I've already said as well, that lovely scrap with Sebastian Vettel side by side for a few corners, eventually making a move around the outside of turn 13, which was really, really nice to watch. Always nice to see drivers battling, but I quite enjoyed that one between Mick and Seb. And I think, you know, a guy who's under such huge pressure at the moment for his seat, Mick Schumacher, he's had a very good weekend, I think, overall. I'm pretty sure the team will look at his race and say, yeah, right, it was 13th, but we did kind of screw him over in the pit stops a little bit with issues. Like I say, 15 seconds lost there, so fantastic. That fantastic's maybe a bit over the top, but really strong weekend for Mick. And I think I think they said it in commentary just about at the right time as well. K-Mag oversteered into the wall early on, ran along the side, hit it quite hard actually. I think first time you saw it, it didn't look that hard. Then you watched the replay and it was quite a whack, but hit tyre face versus the face of the barrier, so not really any huge damage there. Kind of ran down the wall a little bit, but he was okay. Kept it going. Bit of complaining about Latifi moving under the brakes, but really K-Mag 0.8 of a second off Vettel in the end. It was sort of a weird one for Haas. I will very quickly read, as I do for everybody when we've got nothing to say on them, just what their team quotes are for Zandvoort, if they've put them out just yet. They have not yet, so I can't do... I can. They've put it in a race recap. Oh, they've got a link now, Haas. Steady on, lads. Sorry. K-Mag, when you hit the wall in the race, it's never good. There you go. But it was my mistake. I tried too hard, lost the rear, went off and hit the wall, came back, and I was able to continue. I tried my best to come back, but I spent a long time trying to just get back up to the field, but managed to make a few positions and finish P15. Described it as a bit of a wasted weekend, so hoping for better in Monza. And Mick said, we didn't have the greatest of pit stops. I think we had a problem with the front jack not coming down, so I think that brought us out of contention for points this weekend. Nonetheless, it was great being here and had a lot of fun, even though it was the wrong end of the field. Battling with Sebastian is always great. These things happen. We're now looking ahead to scoring points. So see if Gunther said anything interesting. Mick was fighting in the points paying positions, but on his pit stop we had an issue with the front jack, which did not come down, so we need to look into what it was. Catching up from there was always difficult. Lost too many positions. Overtaking is difficult here. So yeah, they've acknowledged that, which is good. And I mean, I thought they would. I wouldn't have thought they'd gone, oh, it was rubbish all weekend. I think they would have called that. But yeah, Haas, Dan, after all that, what do you want to pick out of that? If you remember all of it.
Yeah, you summed it up quite nicely, mate. It was a really disappointing weekend for Haas, because I think this is the first time in a long time their car actually looked quite good, especially with Mick. He was on it this weekend. Certainly one of his best performances of the year so far. You're right to pick out that little scrap with Seb. I think that was one of my favourites of the weekend. I know they've got a little bit of history there, a lovely history there, and are very much respectful of each other. But that was great racing through that stadium section. So move of the race for me, that was. And he certainly got screwed at his pit stop. I'm not fully convinced he would have scored points, but nevertheless, finishing 13th, not too far away, no mistakes. That's a solid drive. And you're right, that's the right time for him, because there are question marks circling. I feel at this stage of the season, it's fair enough to say that K-Mag's had the edge so far this year. It's been close. I think if you compare it to most of the teammate battles, it's been one of the closer ones, but K-Mag has been the one more often than not that's been in front in race and in the quali. But K-Mag did have a pretty terrible weekend this time out, bless him. Though Shumi's one of his better weekends, I think this is easily K-Mag's worst, if I'm fully honest. Out in Q1, not a great performance again in quali. That's quite a run now of disappointing qualifyings for Haas. But the race, that mistake in the opening couple of laps, uncharacteristic, I would say, from Kevin so far this year. But also, just for the life of him, could not get turn one done properly. It seemed like every time he went for an overtake, he went a little bit too deep. And I know most of the drivers have already been here before, but this is the first one where I was like, oh, yeah, K-Mag did have a year off last season. That's easy to forget. But I think he'll move on from that. It's been a strange season for Haas. Some weekends scoring good points. Others, like this weekend, they're in the mix, not quite there. And we've seen them absolutely nowhere on occasion. So I think that's going to continue for the rest of the year. It's a bit of a roller coaster for them. The constructors' standings from sixth downwards is pretty much all to play for. I think they've still got a lot of question marks for next year. Who's going to be their driver lineup? So that's going to be their main focus, I think, for the remaining few races. But yeah, not an awful weekend for them, especially with Mick Schumacher performing like he did, but not brilliant.
Yeah, that's fair. And what I would just one more thing on Mick before I roll on to Alpha. If it's true that the decision next year as to who partners Kevin Magnussen is between Giovinazzi and Mick Schumacher, I'm keeping Mick Schumacher for one more year and giving him another chance. I like Gio. I genuinely do. He did much better than I ever thought he would when he came to Formula One, but I feel like whilst he wasn't bad, I don't think he set the world alight. And I hate the phrase he's had his chance, because that's just not fair, because sometimes drivers do get other opportunities to come back to F1 and they shine and sometimes they fail. But I think that if I had to pick between Gio and Mick, then I put Mick in that car just for one more year. So.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's just my view. And Alfa Romeo, nothing on Zhou, unfortunately, but I will have a look at his quotes in a moment. Bottas, though, Bottas stopped on track after he lost the engine, is what he said. I'll check a press release, see if there's anything more specific than that in just a second. So he lost pace, stopped on track, lost power, lost the engine, stopped on track. Before that, though, decent move on Mick Schumacher at turn one. Just not much there at all for Alfa. They've been really weird lately. I've said it before. They've kind of, I don't know if they've gone backwards or other teams have just outdeveloped and got lighter with their cars, which has kind of really hit them quite hard. But not a great weekend. Not a great couple of weekends for Bottas. Obviously, kind of caught out by that incident in Spa. Knocked out in Q1 as well, and knocked out in Q1 here too. So I said it was always disappointing to end a race ahead of time. I felt the car's pace was better than yesterday's. We had kept progressing, even though it would have still been challenging to score points. The battle in the midfield was quite good and there was plenty of action, but then we had a technical issue and our race was over. Waiting for confirmation, but I think it was a power unit issue, another Ferrari power unit issue. There was no sign prior to that. Everything was feeling okay, and suddenly I lost power. And Zhou said it's been quite a tough race today, particularly towards the end, as we slowed down a lot by all the blue flags. The late safety car also did not play in our favour, as there wasn't much time left, and we put on use soft, which didn't make it easy to charge up. Challenging weekend overall for the team, clearly lacking something compared to the rest of the midfield. We'll have to work hard in these next few days ahead of Monza. Quickly, Dan, I don't know if you've got much, mate, but just wrap up on Alfa in a few words, other than the classic Williams line, they were there.
Yeah, they were there. It does sum it up perfectly. I suppose the only thing I would add to that is I think Zhou, the last few weekends, has been right there with Valtteri, especially this weekend. Zhou was the quicker of the two, which, again, he's another driver where there are question marks circling. Will he be at the team next season? Will he be on the grid next season? But considering it is his first season and the caliber of driver that Valtteri is, yes, I know I can already see people in chat saying I defend Guan Yu a little bit too much, but credit where credit's due, because I do think that was a solid enough weekend from him. And you're right, the car isn't at the level it was there. It's remarkable they're still sixth in the constructors, only one place behind McLaren. And I think it probably will stay that way, considering Valtteri's form at the start of the year. But yeah, it is a team where it's hard to comment. But I will say Guan Yu did a solid job this weekend with the machine he has.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the point scoring, Bottas has destroyed him really in the point scoring. But what I would say is that when you look at the season, a lot of Zhou's bad luck came in that first half of the year when Alfa were at their strongest. So whilst Bottas was there picking up the big points, Zhou was actually retiring from really strong positions because of mechanical issues. I mean, how many races? I mean, several races in reasonable succession, not literally succession, but pretty close to each other, where power unit issues were costing him. I think if he doesn't have those issues, he's right there and he's picking up. I mean, he's not beating Bottas, don't get me wrong, but he's much further up than he would have been points wise. Probably maybe up there with K-Mag and Co. Perhaps. Can't think off the top of my head other races went. All I know is that he had this little phase, didn't he, where it was always something wrong with his poor car, bless him, and then obviously everyone else has got lighter and outdeveloped them, and he's just gone backwards, but Bottas has gone backwards with him. So I'll say it again before we get on to driver of the day. I think he's earned another year at Alfa. They seem impressed with him. The paddock seem impressed with him, and with the greatest of respect, I'm going to take the word of the team and the paddock over Bob77325 on Twitter. Is my answer to that. So, driver of the day, who are we going for then, chat? One surname. Max Verstappen got the official one, I believe. Dan, who is your driver of the day?
Oh, I feel it is quite tricky today, only because I feel like most drivers either had a bad start and a great end, or a great start and a bad end. It seemed a bit all topsy-turvy for everyone, but I think the slight standout to me is going to be George Russell. I think he had a solid first half to the race, started P6, kept himself out of trouble, was close enough with Lewis, obviously went long on his strategy, which was the brave call from Mercedes, but worked out. But I think that call late on not only gifted him that second place, but was such an inspired decision, could have fought for the victory if that restart went or played out a little bit differently. But really strong drive today from George, again showing that consistency. But yeah, more that inspired call really just gives him the edge for me today. So George Russell is my driver of the day.
Yeah.
Have I said it wrong again? Normally I go with someone who shouldn't get it, so at least I was sensible today.
No, I think that's fair. I think.
Thank you.
I'm going to be honest. I don't actually know.
It's really tricky today, isn't it?
Because Verstappen was very good, but got lucky. However, you have to make the argument again for the millionth time on this channel. Got to be there, take advantage, luck falls your way, etc. And if I had a pound for every time Michael Schumacher got lucky when he was having a dominant season, or Lewis Hamilton got lucky when he had a dominant season, then I'd be pretty well off, if I'm being honest. So, well, actually, no, I wouldn't, because it would only be like 3 or 4 times a season, and that's not a lot of money, is it? So, if I had £1 million for every time, I'll change that one slightly so I am rich. But yeah, no, that makes that difficult. Russell made a great call. Good move on Lewis. Actually, I forgot to mention, very close to going in the back of him. Very scary defence and driving there. Oh, got a little bit nervy. I thought, oh God, we've got airborne cars here. But yeah, so that, I don't know. Leclerc, no. Hamilton, I think, does deserve a nod, despite the fact strategy didn't work, because I think he did. Did he do all he did as a driver? Could he have made that call? That's the big question, isn't it? But I think on track, away from the pit lane, he did all he could do. Perez, no. Alonso, I think he was great today. Norris was really, really good today. I think Stroll has been good all weekend, but just deal with the bots. I'm going to have to... Thank you, Jonty. Or Liam, sorry, this time. I'm going to... I don't like picking the same ones. I'll say George. I think if you've got
that's against the rules.
I don't know, because if you've got something so close, if you're trying to pick between drivers and you're nitpicking, then something like a good call, and it may be sat here for some people sat at home watching that race might sit and say, well, that was an obvious call to make, so why are we bigging it up? But it's still going to make the call, whether it's an obvious call or not. There are lots of obvious calls Ferrari don't take, and they should be taking. So I think he deserves the credit for that. So if you're sort of trying to pick, I think you've got to look at that. So I think George. I think I will come to you in chat in a second. By the way, I'm going to keep pondering. But a couple of decisions from the FIA. came in actually quite a while ago, 16:01 for this one. So Yuki Tsunoda driving on track in an unsafe condition, so that's without the seatbelts on. They've decided to offer a reprimand, a non-driving reprimand. Said the stewards heard from Yuki Tsunoda, and the team representative had examined all the usual video evidence and audio evidence and say, I'm going to quote it here. You ready for this? Deep breath. While after a pit stop of car 22, the driver stopped the car due to the fact that he felt a wheel not being properly fitted. The investigation by the stewards led to the conclusion that in fact there was a problem with the differential. Therefore, spelled incorrectly, the car was not in an unsafe condition when released from its pit stop position. However, during the hearing, the driver admitted that after stopping on track, he was ready to abandon his car and started to loosen the safety belts without unlocking it. After that, he travelled back to the pits where the mechanics refasten the belts. It is not possible to determine exactly to which degree the seatbelt had been loosened by the driver. And then they've got the usual stuff there about appealing. So deciding there that no penalty for the seatbelts and no penalty for the unsafe release, instead getting a unsafe condition, instead getting a reprimand. Also no further action, by the way, while I'm on it, on Perez and Sainz in the pit lane. Sainz got the unsafe release 5-second penalty, but nothing on I assume it's a wheel gun incident. The Ferrari wheel gun incident in the pit. So they are your decisions. I won't sit here and read you all the deleted lap times from the race, unless you really want me to. I mean, it sounds really exciting, I know. But there weren't many. There are only 7, to be fair. Vettel, Gasly, Latifi, Ocon, Leclerc, Schumacher, and Verstappen. So they weren't going to read them. Did anyway. There we go. Anyway, driver of the day we were on, weren't we? Let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Yeah, just block the bots, mate. It's absolutely fine. Just block them. Nick, I think your first one in says Russell. Jamie's gone with Alonso. I'm going to say Rye because I butcher things and I'm sorry. It says Ricardo. Michael says Max. Fanta Boy says Hamilton. Julie says Bottas. Katie's gone with Hamilton. Katie B has gone with Hamilton. Professional Moron has gone with Hamilton. Akintia says Alonso. Free says if not Max, I am going Russell or Hamilton. Jonathan says Hamilton. Tacitus says Russell or Alonso. Waldo says Hamilton. Wakasan says Russell. Rob has gone with Russell. Nebula says Hamilton. Cravone says Russell. Daryl says Russell. Dan Philpott says Thiago Monteiro. Yes. Guardian of the Blind says Russell because of that call to say Verstappen is just boring. We know he is good. Fair enough. Either of the Mercs or Max says Chris. Cameron says Lewis. Sonny says I would say Hamilton if he had won this, but Russell to be honest. Nebula obviously meant Stoffel Van Dorn, of course. Alonso says Durodes. Sighted Canvas says George, Mr. Consistent. Sonoda MVP says Dell. Alonso made some good moves out there. Yes, he did indeed. Alonso came out 6 seconds ahead of Ocon after being 3 places behind. Yeah, I think we touched on that earlier, actually, Nick, about how he managed to undercut him on those hard tyres and that surprise pace that we had. Couple more. Let's see what we've got. Unknown Racer says Fernando Alonso. Yeah. I just can't. Everyone's talking about the bots now and talking about that decision, so I'm going to lose. If I've missed you, I'm sorry, but I'll probably have to leave it there. Quick skim through, see if there's anybody I have missed. Yeah, Charles Edward Cheese has gone with Russell. Pete says I'll say Mick. He didn't do anything wrong. And I think that's pretty much a lot of Russell stuff here. W. Cooley says Ham. Jamie says the Pigeons. They're the drivers of the weekend. The Pigeons. Yeah, I think that's fair. Please do drop a like. We are about... Oh, God, that's maths. We're about 80 away, 82 away from 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. We've still got just over 800 here, so please do leave a like. Always appreciated. And I don't know how Charles is feeling. Let me know, mate, if you're a bit drunk. You probably are. And don't forget to subscribe as well. Monza preview on Thursday, and then Sunday, of course, it's a race reaction, and then there might be some stuff in between, depending on what happens driver market-wise, or if I stream some more F1 Manager. But if you have any questions, please do pop them in chat, and we will answer a few. Let me know when you need to run off, Dan. It's not a problem, mate. I've got a few minutes, but yeah, let me know if you've got any questions in chat. The one thing I wanted to bring up very quickly was something Helmut Marko has said to Chris Medland after the race today regarding Gasly and Herta. Let me see if I find his actual tweet. I was going to do it off the top of my head, but I think it's only fair to read the tweet as it came in. But essentially, kind of continuing the talk of Gasly to Alpine. So he says, Helmut Marko just told me an agreement has already been reached with all parties for Colton Herta to join F1 if he is granted a super license by the FIA, and he expects a decision by Monza. Marko also suggested that an agreement involves Gasly to Alpine, but again, it's an if a super license is granted to Herta. So everything agreed between Herta, I assume Andretti will be involved in there, AlphaTauri. I'm maybe take from that an agreement is in place with Alpine as well, but that is only going to happen if Herta can get the super license from the FIA, and that kind of builds on what Horner said post-race about how Gasly is only going to be released if they can get somebody in. Otherwise, they're not going to obviously release him. So Herta looking possible, Gasly to Alpine looking possible. It's all going to come down to these super license, Dan. And I believe he's only got 32 out of the 40 required. So I think there's either got to be some rejigging of how they did it under COVID, because they had a special ruling for super license points, didn't they? Because the lack of racing under COVID, or the fewer races in a season. So there might be something they can do there. But a few team bosses, actually, to be fair, saying they don't think there should be special dispensation for Colton Herta. It's a difficult one, isn't it, Dan? Because a lot of people speak very highly of him, but a lot of people also point out that there's a lot of mistakes there that he keeps making. But he's certainly, from what little I've seen of him, seems like a rapid lad. Still young, lots of potential, so kind of fits that AlphaTauri mold. But I would also say that it's not really a glowing opinion of your driver academy if you're having to go trying to get the FIA to give you special dispensation on super license points. So I guess fuel onto the fire that I think was reported by another outlet the other week or the other day. Could this be something about Andretti buying AlphaTauri? Lost. It just seems odd. They've got Lawson, they've got Deruvela, they've got Hauger. Do they not? I mean, I don't know what the super license points is for those drivers, but do they not see them as the future, or are we losing AlphaTauri?
I personally see it as more of a risk worth taking with Herta as opposed to an Andretti coming in. And I more say that because yes, you've got your Lawsons, your Haugers, Iwasa as well is, I think, leading all of them in the standings at the moment in F2. I'm not too sure if that's changed post this weekend. But are any of them in the fight for the title? No. Well, Lawson's in his second year of F2. You'd like him to be fighting for the title if you could at this stage. Iwasa and Hauger, they definitely need an extra year in F2 to really prove they're ready. With a Herta, if you can get him in for 1 year, that could be worth it, just because the potential of him being great is there. The potential of him being awful is also there. It's a risk. But look at drivers like Montoya that came over from IndyCar and excelled. And I think the caliber of driver that is now in IndyCar, Grosjean, of course, being a top tier driver that is there, Herta is one of the best. Though he's not won the title, his outright speed is certainly there. And it is very reminiscent of an early Max Verstappen, where there are crashes, there are incidents, there are mistakes, but pure numbers, pure speed, it's certainly there. He knows how to race. He knows how to overtake. So I feel it's worth the risk when the current Red Bull driver pool is lacking slightly. It's a brave risk. I feel there's also drivers like even a Felipe Drugovich, which, you know, he's got his super license points. Is that a safer risk? Yes, it is. Do you get a season out of him? If he's good, keep him on. If he's not, promote one of the Red Bull drivers. Sure, that's an option. But I think when you've got McLaren sniffing around, is that going to happen as much now? Piastri's there? Probably not. But if Piastri's not great, McLaren might move on after a year. They only gave Stoff 2 seasons. So McLaren can be ruthless as well. But the signs are there for Colton. But I mean, I've said it 10,000 times. I do see it as a risk. I think he's great. I really do believe he could be special in Formula One. But when you look at Daniel Ricciardo moving to McLaren and not doing great, there's always the chance that he could be a bit of a flop and he could be out as quick as he was in. So it's going to be a really fascinating story if he does move into Formula One. But I think it's a gamble worth taking, especially for a team like AlphaTauri, especially when Sergio Perez isn't quite hitting the heights you'd kind of hope him to. And maybe they're thinking 1 or 2 years' time, they might need a refresh at Red Bull.
Yeah, I think I can see a situation where Red Bull do a deal with Andretti almost, where Andretti come in and buy, and we're going maybe a little bit up the road here, but and into pure speculation, but maybe a situation where Red Bull and Andretti agree that Andretti will buy AlphaTauri, Colton Herta comes across, but Red Bull have first refusal on the second seat, so they've still got a route for their juniors for a few years. So Yuki can stay, and maybe they could give a Lawson or a Deruvula or a Hauger or whoever an opportunity in the future. Maybe something there they could do. It's a speculation. We've known for a while that there's been talk of them selling AlphaTauri and wanting to just sort of focus on the main team, and then the Porsche stuff coming through. That sounds like that might be. I think the phrase used is dead in the water. That might not be happening because Red Bull don't want. The rumor is, to keep it very simple, they don't want Porsche to have too much control in the team. Is what the rumor mill is saying. So maybe there is something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But I think letting AlphaTauri go, you know, how can I word this? We're not at a phase with Red Bull, particularly the junior program, where we've got the next Max Verstappen, the next Sebastian Vettel, the next Daniel Ricciardo, the next Carlos Sainz coming through. I don't want to be slamming the likes of Lawson and co. They're good drivers, but they don't strike me as big superstars that Red Bull are going to get behind, if you know what I mean. So maybe now does feel like the right time to get rid of AlphaTauri. Like I said, keep first refusal on that second seat if they do want to give somebody an opportunity, and maybe a deal could be done there. Andretti desperate to come in. A lot of people desperate to see Andretti. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating as well. I think there's also on the Porsche Red Bull thing. I was thinking about this the other day. How much of this sudden decision from Red Bull not wanting, or this whole dead in the water talk about the Porsche deal, how much of this is because Honda have said they want to come back, and Red Bull have a great relationship with Honda? They're still working together now. They've extended their deal to the end of 2025. I'm just wondering if maybe we might see a revival of a full Red Bull Honda thing in 2026. We're getting way ahead. Let's not get into that. You've also got to spend money on AlphaTauri as a brand. You know, they are their own team, but Red Bull are still funding, aren't they? So as a brand, a company rather. Let's see what you guys are saying in chat. Liam says, do you think Max Verstappen will beat Michael and Seb's record of 13 wins in a season? I mean, he's got a chance, hasn't he? Let's be fair. Where are we at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He's done 10 already. Italy, a lot of people think that Red Bull are going to be pretty damn unstoppable there based on Belgium, but we've seen before based on this, based on that. It doesn't always work that way, so he could win that one. Mexico, USA, some big power parts to those tracks, so they'd be good. That would put him on 13. So Singapore, Japan, Sao Paulo, Abu Dhabi. I mean, look, the form he's in at the moment, he's won 10 already, and we've still got 7 races to go. It's very doable, Dan. It is very doable.
Definitely. And I think when you consider, when we always say with Ferrari that you're always going to get served bad luck, but it's what you do with that bad luck. Max, in very recent races, Hungary and Spa, didn't have great luck starting outside the top 10 in both races and still won. So if he can do that and convert those into 2 victories, another one today, I think he will get that record. But I might also throw it out there. Do you think he could beat Seb's 9 in a row? Because that wouldn't surprise me either.
He's still got an engine penalty to take, possibly. But then he also had an engine penalty in Belgium.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's done 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So he's only got to win. I mean, Italy, Singapore. See, Singapore's the big question mark, isn't it? If Mercedes are as quick as they were this weekend, tough to overtake there, even tougher to overtake there, you could argue. So that's a big. I mean, if he wins Italy and Singapore, then I can see him doing Japan, USA, Mexico. He can. He absolutely can. I'm not sure he will. I mean, Ferrari are going to want to win next weekend, aren't they? But they're going to have to sort their strategy out. I keep saying it. It's possible. I mean, I'm being pedantic. Of course he can. It's just Willie. I'm not sure, but I think winning, say, 14 races is more likely than 9 in a row. I would say, or more confident in that prediction than 9 in a row. So, was Perez the Red Bull worth it? Says Lucas. I think so. He's not, we've had a shot at him for his form today. He's not been in a great position. He was pretty disappointing this weekend. But I think overall, based on their time in the car and based on the last few years, I'd still take Perez over Albon and Gasly. Albon's impressing me in that Williams. Gasly did a great job last year in AlphaTauri, but I don't think either of them would be a big enough step up on Perez or a step up at all. So I think so. He's won races with them. Won Monaco. He's podiums. I think, the car's better than it was for Albon and Gasly, but I don't think it's a bad shout. I think he'll stay as well. I don't see why they want to move him on. I was just skimming through chat. I just see. I'm not going to bite. But it does baffle me how many people think they know everything when we just sit and speculate, and it's like, actually, that's not going to happen. Well, you don't know any more than we do. So, unless Dan's got his secret inside person, I don't know if you've got somebody on the inside who can tell you everything that happens, Dan. I can't.
I thought that was you. I thought you were my inside man. Oh, what a shame.
Kaber says, assuming Ricciardo was willing to go to Haas and or Alfa, would dropping Schumacher's Zhou for him be warranted or not, in your opinion? You could start on that one, Dan. So, assuming Ricciardo was willing to go to Haas or Alfa, would dropping Schumacher's Zhou for him be warranted?
Absolutely. I'm still in the camp that Danny Rick can get back to his best, but even just with my business head on, for a team like Haas or Alfa Romeo, the chance to sign a driver like Daniel Ricciardo with his huge fan base that comes with that, even if it's just for one season, it's worth it. Yes, it comes with a lot of finances in terms of actually getting him to drive the car, but the fact that he's not particularly favoured at a top team at the moment, maybe Alpine, but even that seems a little bit dead in the water at the moment. Ricciardo is going to want to drive somewhere, so they can get a top tier driver potential at a cut price, again with the brand that comes with. I think it's so worth it. I really, really do. And it's no disrespect to Guan Yu, to Mick, but I would also throw in K-Mag or Bottas. I personally would put Ricciardo as definitely a peak Ricciardo I would put above all of those drivers. And for the chance of getting a driver on that level for a team like Haas, they're still the newest team on the grid, but also a team like Alfa Romeo, you've absolutely got to take it. I really, really do believe that. Am I biased? Would I absolutely love Danny Rick at Haas? Absolutely. But also without bias there, it's for me a bit of a no-brainer, especially when Mick's struggling at the moment and Guan Yu. Much as I love him, I don't think he's a long-term option for Alfa Romeo.
So, yeah, Prime Ronaldo. Prime Ronaldo at AlphaTauri would be amazing, or Alfa Romeo, yeah. No, Prime Ricciardo, yeah, absolutely. But we haven't got Prime Ricciardo at the moment, have we? That's the trouble. And if you're a team boss looking at him and then looking at Mick or Zhou, yes, you know what he's done in the past, but right now, do I think Ricciardo's performing better than Zhou and Mick? No. I think Mick had a really sloppy start to the season. There's definitely been improvement. I think he's been a little bit closer to Kevin Magnussen than people think. He had a very good weekend this weekend. If he keeps that up, then he might do himself a very good case for staying there. And I think Zhou, if you take his look out of it, it looks better on paper than it actually does look on paper, if that makes sense. You also have to remember that Ricciardo's going to cost Haas a lot of money. Yes, it'll be a pay cut. I mean, technically he doesn't need paying next year, does he? Because McLaren are buying him out.
Yeah.
So he might do it for free, but he's going to cost a lot more money than a Mick is, or a Gio might cost. And if Gio comes in, they might get some kickback from Ferrari. I I think you look at Alfa, there's a lot of uncertainty about what they're going to do for the future, because we've only got one more year of Alfa Romeo before Audi might come in as a sponsor, and then in 2026 they're taking over the team proper. So do they want to put Ricciardo in there now and spend? Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of variables in the Alfa one, and even down at Williams, I still think if they want to put Logan Sargent in that car in the next year or so, I still think if they don't think Logan Sargent is ready this year, take Latifi's money for one more year. He's not been great. He really hasn't. But I think they're not going to get Piastri now, which is what the deal was. Keep Latifi, take his money, promote Sargent at the end of next year if they don't think he's ready now. They might think he is ready now, but if they don't, then I'd rather take that extra cash for a team like Williams. So, and I can't see them spending big on a Ricciardo to throw Williams' name in there. So it's difficult because, like you say, Dan, when you look at his F1 record, you go, oh, yeah, I'd take Ricciardo all day long. But then you look at the here and now and the other variables involved, and you think, maybe not. So I wouldn't take Ricciardo at Alfa. I think Zhou should get another year, and I'm not sure I'd take him at Haas. But then it depends on what Haas's options are. I suppose if the options are, let's say Mick goes, we're really speculating here. Let's say Mick goes back to early season Mick, right, and starts struggling again, and your other alternative is Giovinazzi, maybe then go with Ricciardo. Because, I mean, if they're your options,
yeah,
then maybe then. Raul says, if Haas could get Danny Rick on results-based contract, that would be a tough sell, but that's the only way I see Danny Rick going to Haas. If Ricciardo has already been paid by McLaren, then isn't he technically free to someone next year? Sells built 2JZ Lexus. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure he's going to want paying. But he might take a far reduced salary, if that makes sense. But then Nick makes the point as well. And Nick Surface, that implies Danny Rick is only motivated by money. Does he want to race at Haas or Williams or Alfa next year, or would he? And I think there's a lot more to this, by the way, as the rumour mill is swirling. Would he be better taking a potential reserve role at, say, Mercedes? Hamilton's contract's up at the end of 2023. Ooh. If he does a great job at Mercedes behind the scenes and they're impressed with him and they need a driver alongside Russell, I'm not saying they would go for him, but would that be a better place for him than driving around at the back in, say, a Williams, potentially?
No.
Chance to gather himself as well.
I don't think Danny Rick could be a reserve driver. I think someone, again, I know it's a couple of years ago, but someone who has achieved what he's achieved and still is at an age where he can do a solid job, I don't think if he would become a reserve driver, he'd ever get back in.
Yeah, but
I think if he's worth going to another category rather than a reserve driver, because there's definitely other categories that would take him in a heartbeat. I don't think that does him any favours.
I get that, but also he's had a really rough couple of years. He left Red Bull, could have stayed, chose not to for whatever his reasons were. We know some of them, but he chose to leave. He went to Renault, didn't really work out, or they had an all right 2020. They did well together in 2020. Didn't work out at McLaren, and he's been effectively sacked from that team. Do you not think a year just on the sidelines a little bit? Bear in mind, he said he only wants F1 as well, so he doesn't want another series. Would a year on the sidelines do him a bit of good just to... It's going to sound really A-level psychology or something now, but just try and find himself a little bit and get in that simulator at somewhere like Mercedes, do what he can to help them develop that car, get himself back to his feeling his best. I don't know, but I just feel like a year out wouldn't be the worst thing for him. But then you make the fair point that, or to expand on your fair point, that a year out of F1 is a long time. And although we've seen drivers like Alonso come back, we've seen Ocon come back, you're quickly forgotten, aren't you, in Formula One? So that's always a danger. And he's not, bless him, he's not getting any younger. I said bless him again, but he's not getting any younger. And it'd be very easy to forget. 33 now. Not old, is it? Might be for you, but it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's so tricky. And I mean, we're both right in our points. It's certainly an unknown for Daniel Ricciardo. I think I rate his time at Renault a little bit higher than you, potentially. I think especially that second season Ricciardo at Renault is the best Daniel Ricciardo ever, in my personal opinion, but maybe that's a bit extreme. But it's no doubt going to be a risk for anyone. I would say just to kind of round up my point, is that I wouldn't. It's not the end of the world a year out, because again, he's such a big name. Alonso came back. I'm sure if Sebastian Vettel in a couple of years was sniffing around, there'd be a few teams interested. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen came back. Kimi Raikkonen raced forever. So it is possible, especially for top drivers. I personally feel, and I've really not got a lot to back this up apart from a gut feeling, I feel the best way you're going to get Ricciardo back to his best is to get him in a new environment and just scoring good results. I don't think he's someone that can wait around, think about it, and rebuild himself. But the best way to rebuild himself is to just crack on with it and get a big result. I hate to bring it back to my man, but I feel with Grosjean, he easily could have had a year out and crumbled quite easily. But the fact they gave him a chance, he got some results, especially 2012 after his ban. He kept on going, kept plugging away, and 2013 was incredible at the end of the season. And I feel I put Danny Rick in that category, where give him a good couple of results under his belt, give him that bit of confidence. That's going to do him a world of good, as opposed to a year out as a reserve driver being seen as the third best. I feel he needs to go to a team where he's going to be loved. He's going to be that number one and really feel like he's their main man. That's kind of the thing I think's been lacking for him. And I think a big reason why he fell out of love with Red Bull is that he didn't feel that anymore. I think he needs that bit of nurture in Danny Rick.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm just not many seats, is there? Or are there?
No.
And does he want to go? I was going to say, does he want to go from McLaren to fighting down the back of the grid? But I mean, he was 17th today. The only driver behind him was Latifi. He's down there anyway, isn't he? I'm not trying to be awful, but it's true. He's down there anyway. So, I mean, I think Magnussen, if you get the right Ricciardo, if you get a proper Danny Rick, if you want to say that, the Ricciardo that a lot of people still believe is in there, him and Magnussen could be pretty damn good at Haas. You're just not guaranteed to get that driver. It's difficult. It's hard, because I kind of think, like I say, a year out might benefit him, but also, as you've pointed out and others in chat have pointed out, if he goes quickly forgotten, that could be it. And is that the way he wants to end? It's really fascinating. And he could in theory offer to race for Haas for free, but he's still going to want a salary. Obviously, I don't know what's in the contract with McLaren. Nobody in chat, contrary to what they might claim, knows what's in his contract. Nobody at Sky knows what's in his contract. But it'd be fascinating to see what the agreement was between him and McLaren for real. Have you got a go, Dan?
I do. I do, which is a shame, because I love my Haas chat.
I know you do. I'll let you go, mate. I'll answer a couple of questions myself, then I'll wrap up, but I'll let you disappear. So thank you, mate. I appreciate it as always. And
absolute pleasure.
I'm sure we can get another one sorted very, very soon for another race. There's plenty still to come.
I know. And the championship's so close, so it's only going to heat up from here.
Anything could happen.
No, thank you very much for having me, mate. Awesome race today. Loved being on this stream, and I'll see you in the next one.
No worries, mate. I'll talk to you soon.
See you later.
Bye. Yep, Dan's had to go. He's going out at 7:30, so he needs to get ready. So I'll answer a couple more of your questions, then I'll wrap it up. We'll also do the poll result in a second, so get you voting if you've not already. Just saw another silly season one. After this race and Ricciardo's continuing struggle, who is the favourite for that Alpine seat next season? That's from Elijah. So in chat, it feels like it's an obvious answer, given all the stuff going around, but let me know in chat. One surname. Who do you think? Not who do you want. Who do you think will be in that Alpine seat next season? It sounds like it's going to be Gasly. My money's on Gasly. Not that I'd make anything from it. The only thing is, this Colton Herta thing. If AlphaTauri are not going to release Gasly unless Colton Herta gets the super license points, then where do Alpine go after that? That's going to be the big question, is it? And who they go for it. And maybe that's when Ricciardo's name re-enters the conversation, if that makes sense. If maybe Ricciardo is their backup for next year if they can't get Gasly. But then, I mean, Ricciardo, I think, if Alpine continues to progress as they are and as strong as they are this year, next year, then that's a great seat to be in. It's just whether your Lauren Rossi's, for example, want him back at the team, given how he left it. So I think Ricciardo's back in that conversation if they can't get Gasly, because I'm just trying to think of other, maybe Schumacher. He could be that fallback as well. We know Ocon likes Mick Schumacher and wants him there, so maybe that's what we're looking at, Gasly or Ricciardo / Mick Schumacher. It's a difficult one because some good drivers out there, but nobody you're filling big shoes, aren't you? If you're replacing Fernando Alonso, and that's a tough one. Bryson says Gasly, Nick says Gasly, Jamie says Gasly or Mick. Matthew says Mick, Waldo says Gasly, Professional Moron says Gasly, Dell says Gasly, Jonathan and Pete say Gasly, Kyber says Gasly, Chris says Gasly, Dan Philpott says Jack Doohan. I think a few people might say that one. Killerman says Gasly. Jamie Santos says Gasly said the deal is basically done from a chat that was heard between him and Charles last week. I think he did say in a press conference, though, didn't he, Jamie, that wasn't F1 related or wasn't related to an F1 seat. So obviously take all of that with a pinch of salt, but also take his comments about it not being about F1 with a pinch of salt or not an F1 seat. Gasly, although I feel like Ocon is pressuring Alpine to sign Mick, says unknown racer. So there's a few in there. Charles Edward Chi says hurry. Henny on an empty stomach was not the smartest decision. Yeah, please do drop a like, by the way. We're 44 away. I'm concerned for Charles Edward Cheese's health, but I wouldn't mind getting those last 50 in just to see if he can take one more. Sorry, Charles. Any more questions before we're wrapping up today? I'm sure there's something I wanted to talk about. I can't remember what it bloody well was. I'm not going back into the conspiracy thing, no. Dan says, I only said Doohan because I like him in F2. Yeah, no, I think Jack Doohan's doing all right in F2, but I would say F1 next year is a year too soon. Definitely. Is Albon still in the Red Bull family, says Matthew? No, he said... He's confirmed that that's not a thing anymore. It's a long-term deal with Williams. It's just with Williams. So I assume from next season we'll see a new helmet or at least lose the balls from the side of it, which was an interesting one. I hadn't spotted that in all the announcements when it was announced, but it came out a little bit afterwards that he's not in that Red Bull family anymore, which I think is good for Albon. And I think if Gasly can get out as well, that's good for him. And I think, they have to be grateful for what the Red Bull family have done for them over the years, getting them to F1, giving them opportunities. But I can't ever see Albon back at AlphaTauri or Red Bull. I can't ever see Gasly back at Red Bull. So there's no point in them sticking around. They may as well get themselves out of those deals and focus on their career. So that's a good deal for Albon. I think it'll be good for Gasly if he gets out. So if you want a random topic, is Drugovic going to be anywhere near F1? Looks set to win F2, but no one even talks about him, says Kyber. I don't know enough about Drugovic, to be honest. I've not followed F2 all that closely this year. I see a lot of people saying he's been in F2 for a few years now, but so was Nick de Vries, and people still link him to every seat going. I would argue that it's still a pretty decent field as well in F2 this year. So I think he's probably, if he's going to end up anywhere, because the F2 title, I know I was looking at the tables earlier, it's done, isn't it? It's absolutely done. He's a good driver. I think he's probably going to end up in a reserve role. I've seen some rumours about Aston Martin maybe taking him on as a reserve role, but I can't see him in a race seat for next season, which a lot of you might argue is criminal given what he's done this year in F2. But I think you look at seats available. If you're going to be promoting youngsters, Alfa Romeo are going to go for Porsche because they've got Porsche. Williams are going to go for Sargent because they've got Sargent on their books. Haas, they've got their deal with Ferrari. No, Ferrari don't necessarily have first refusal on the seat, but they've got a close relationship with Ferrari, so there might be someone like Gio coming back in, or Mick, although apparently his ties are over with Ferrari at the end of the year, but he might stay in that seat. Difficult to see it. The only thing I might say is maybe Williams, if they don't want Sargent just yet, they want to give him another year or two in F2 and they don't really want to keep Latifi, maybe there could be something there for him. Maybe. Difficult, isn't it? But it's this whole argument every year we have about F2 champions and not getting into F1. It's not enough seats, a lot of talent out there. Something's got to give. So Max was signed basically all because of his potential, says Jamie. I still remember the fuss that kind of came out when Max Verstappen joined F1. A lot of people, he's too young, and I always go back to Martin Brundle's line on that one, if you're good enough, you're old enough. We'll end that poll as well, by the way. So who will finish P2 in the Constructors' Championship was the poll, and the result is pretty emphatic. 72% of you think that Mercedes will finish in second place, and 27% think Ferrari. So what is the gap-ish? Because I don't want to do maths. It's only 30 points, you know. It is only 30 points. Yeah. I can see it. And then we all owe... Oh, I forgot his name, bless him. Oh, that's terrible. He'll know who he is. We all know somebody an apology. It'll come to me in a minute. Because we kind of were like, nah, that's never going to happen. But by your logic, Nick de Vries should be in F1. I don't think Nick de Vries should be in F1. I've already said that. Always said that one. Nice guy. Good driver. FE champion. World champion, of course. But I don't think he should be in F1. I'm just making the point that F2 champions not getting to F1 upsets a lot of people. Not enough seats available. Difficult with talent. Oh, thanks, Jamie. Just clarifying that one. No, I just don't think Nick de Vries absolutely should be in F1. I don't always think the F2 champion should be. I think you have to look at the variables in there. So you've got how long have they been in the series? What's the field like? What's the talent like in the field? Because it's not always as straightforward as such and such won the title. They should get an F1 seat if you follow what I'm saying. Andrew, thank you very much for your super chat. Says, I might be in the wrong, but Crofty and Button seemed really biased towards Lewis today. It got hard to listen to after a point because of how they were close to rooting Lewis on. Maybe I'm wrong, but not. I wouldn't have said no. I would say no more than usual. Andrew would be my read on that, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I've said this before about Sky, that they are a British broadcaster, and you can understand the level of bias. We see it with Italian broadcasters with Ferrari. We see it with Spanish broadcasters with Fernando. We see it and Carlos. We see it with Dutch broadcasters with Verstappen. The only difference between all of them and Sky is that while Sky is a British broadcaster, they do also go out to a lot of countries. So I think they should be allowed to be biased towards British drivers, but they should also be careful because it does go out to a lot of people. It's not like, you know, we don't get the Italian feed over here, so it doesn't matter if they're biased towards Ferrari, if you follow what I'm saying. If that makes sense, I hope it makes sense. Or at least acknowledge it. Just say, hey, look, we're British. Of course, we're going to be leaning a bit more towards this, but I can understand why they also don't, because that then sets off conspiracies again, doesn't it? So my answer to that, really, Andrew, is no more than usual. But at the same time, I can understand the focus on Hamilton today because he had a great shot at winning that race. It would have been his first win of the year. A lot of talk about whether or not he can continue his streak of winning in every season he's been in F1. And actually, super quickly, I was thinking about this sort of after the race. How bizarre. How does it feel for everybody that we've got 15 races into the season and Mercedes haven't won a Grand Prix? I know that we saw in pre-season testing they were going to struggle, but did anybody, hand on heart, completely honestly believe that we get 15 races into a season without a Mercedes win? I didn't. I thought they'd struggle early doors, but I thought they'd come back and they'd win races this year. I didn't necessarily think the championship was possible. I didn't think we'd be looking at 7 races to go, and we're trying to work out where they might be able to pick up a wing. Dan says Singapore possibly, but it still baffles me. But we're so used to these years of Mercedes domination, aren't we? So crazy. Lewis is the underdog here, so rooting for the underdog is usually more fun. That's fair, says DeRodes. DeRodes? I'm sorry. You can hate me for that. I'm so sorry. Hamilton had a great shot according to Button and Button only. Max would have been like 5 seconds behind with 10 laps fresher tyres, possibly softer compound, says Dell. I think he had a shot today. Not the way the race played out, but I mean in terms of their pace the Mercedes had, if you follow what I'm saying. Safety cars ended that for him. Yeah. Acid 001 says, wow, Mercedes hasn't won a race. I haven't paid attention all season. That's pretty insane. Yeah. No, I was looking at some people saying that we're not really feeling like Mercedes did have a shot. I'm talking about the pace we saw. The one stopper, and I know the race. This is a kind of a relevant point because the race, it's exactly how the race played out. We did have safety cars, but you removed them. The one stopper could have worked today, really, really well. That's what I mean by a shot. I suppose better shot than say somewhere like Belgium where they were well off the pace, or I think Hungary was their other chance as well. And that's why when you look at Hungary, Zandvoort, and then again you go to Singapore, they are the tracks, aren't they, where you're probably going to see Mercedes' best chances of winning. I'll tell you what then, that's what we'll end on, because we can't come to the end of the stream now. 7 races to go. We've got Italy, Singapore, Japan, USA, Mexico, Brazil, and Abu Dhabi. If Mercedes are going to win a race this year, which track is it most likely going to be on? Dan reckons Singapore. I think he's got a great point there. I don't think Monza is going to happen at Italy. Where do we reckon, chat? Richard Potts says Cota. I think what Cota says. Oh, yeah. Some good I can see Cota being an opportunity. Suzuka is a good shot. I'm not sure on Suzuka because it is quite twisty, isn't it, at places? But we've also got power, which works for Red Bull quite nicely. But if we're going to go into what works for Red Bull and what might stop that, then we're going to be here all night. So David reckons Mexico. Frido reckons Japan. Gingerfest says Singapore. Dutchman O'War says Singapore 100%. Jamie says Abu Dhabi, just for the lols. Just for the memes. Abu Dhabi says sighted canvas. Pete reckons Abu Dhabi is a good shout. Also saying Singapore. You never know, D, I guess, is what I want to say on that. Is you look at the schedule. I'll just try and pull it up again on my thingy. I've lost it. There we go. You look at what's to come. On paper, Singapore's the best, but we don't know, do we? I mean, I don't think they're focusing on this year's car anymore from what they've been saying. So focus is on next year, but they've got a great shot at second in the Constructors, so they might want to push for it. Yeah, Brazil, could be good for Merck. Richard says, I don't think Singapore because Mercedes can't qualify well enough. Qualify's not been bad, but I think you'd probably be needing one of those epic laps that Lewis put in a few years ago at Singapore. Still, I reckon one of the greatest laps in qualifying of all time, and there have been some great laps in qualifying over the years. Let's have a look through the Red Bull press release as well super quickly, see if there's anything. So Max described his race as not as quite eventful, but not straightforward. We had to make the right calls, and it all worked out well in the end. Mercedes were very quick on the harder compound, which we didn't expect, so it made it more difficult for us as we were less compatible with the hards. Managed everything quite well, made the right calls on strategy. And Sergio Perez, obviously this is a great day for the team, but it wasn't the best day at the office for me. I struggled with tyre degradation in the first and second stints, and I never quite got the balance where I wanted it to be. It was a hectic race with incidents in the pit lane, but I was lucky that my front wing wasn't changed when I drove over, wasn't damaged, when I drove over the wheel gun. Despite the difficulty I had, we managed to get some good points. There's lots to take away from today and plenty to understand from our side that we can come back strong in Monza. I think Red Bull are going to be pretty damn unstoppable in Monza. Don't want to give too much away from predictions on Thursday. I'll take a couple more of your comments then, and then we're going to wrap it up because that's going to be the 2.5 hour mark-ish. Mary says, I've been missing Singapore like crazy. Can't wait. I know a lot of people are missing Singapore, actually. Quite a tough, demanding track for the drivers, and a tough, demanding track for Sean to map out on his track map from the street view when he does that. But, it is a good track and a great spectacle as well. McLaren win at Monza with Ricciardo, says Jamie. Problem with Mercedes is that they qualify badly but only have a fast car on tracks where it's hard to overtake, says Pete. Singapore is a driver track and they do have 2 drivers who can qualify damn well, says Kyber. Red Bull upgrades in Singapore, says he. Just on that, actually, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Christian Horner quite cryptic about this talk of new lightweight chassis coming soon. He's sort of saying don't believe everything you read and sort of almost dismissing it in some ways. But then you can't read too much into that. Nick Surface, fair point, says in the Constructors, second in the Constructors means less CFD time. I think Toto wants to finish third. That's a very good point. Very good point, yes. Dell says Latifi points next race. He could do. Very slippery car, that Williams, so maybe it'll be good in Monza. It was good in Spa, wasn't it? Certainly the hands of Alex Albon. And James says, can't wait for Singapore. Really missed it. One of my favourites of the season. The lights and everything makes it amazing. Absolutely. It's quite the spectacle, isn't it? But we are going to leave it there. We are close to 500 likes, so 17 more. If 17 people could drop a like, if you haven't already, that'd be massively appreciated. For Charles Edward Cheese, look, every single super chat I appreciate, whether it's $1 or $1,000, it's incredible, and I appreciate every single one. But Charles rocks up here every weekend and supports the channel like crazy. So thank you so much to him. Thank you to all of you for super chats tonight. So let's try and get that to 500. All the shots and that aside, all the drinking aside, massively appreciate it. So thank you very much, Charles. Thank you to everybody as well. So we're going to wrap it up there. Like I say, I have done my end screen today, which is rare. I usually forget. I will be back. I might stream some F1 Manager before Thursday. I'll see how the week goes. Quick puppy update for anyone interested. He started teething and his baby teeth have started falling out. So he's in a bit of pain and he's quite whiny and lethargic and dare I say a little bit pathetic. It's quite sweet, so I'll see how he's feeling, bless him, when it comes to streaming later in the week. I will be back, of course, definitely on Thursday with the preview for the Italian Grand Prix. Really looking forward to Monza. Also, one of my favourite tracks. I absolutely love Monza. I wouldn't mind seeing the banking in person. Would be quite cool. And then, of course, we'll be live next Sunday, 5 p.m-ish, depending on red flags, for the race reaction stream. We've just off 500, so hopefully we can get there before I finish. Don't forget to subscribe as well so you don't miss out on any future content. And you can follow me on social media. All the links you need are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.